The story starts with a mafia head tying up a teenage girl for her father's debt. He speaks about how 1988 was a good year for them when they could sell girls to the red light district easily. He is looking for this girl's father now. He gets a call hoping his minions found her father, but they inform him about a guy who came back to life after unliving him twice. The guy is now standing in their base holding a stick. Then the mafia men all rush toward him to beat him up. The story's protagonist, name is Hwan Suk. He is 29 years old. He is now dying, after getting stabbed multiple times by the mafia's men. They then drop him in the river. Suk wishes that, even for just one moment, he could live like a proper human, or at least get a job. 16 hours before the incident, Suk is gaming inside his room. Then a high school girl knocks at the door for their shared water bill. But he hands over 2 expensive cigarette packs instead, as he does not have any cash with him. She then throws the cigarettes away and gives him a candy. She tells him to quit smoking. Suk thinks she is surprisingly a sweet high schooler, despite her feisty demeanor. Since high school, Suk has been very rebellious and short-tempered. He cannot tolerate rude and irrational people, thus he overreacts. He cannot even get a good job because he graduated from some third-class university. Suk has a small dream. He just wants to pay off his debts, pay his rent, and not starve. He realizes being 30 with no experience is very scary. On the way to his home, 2 mafia minions are kicking in that high school girl's door, telling her to come out. They have been doing it for 2 weeks every day now. As she is not coming out, they cut the gas line and insert the pipe inside her room. Suk then intervenes and they fight. The minions then stab Suk multiple times. They drop him into a river on the day of 1st April, Friday. After 3 days, on the April 4th, Suk wakes up in his room. The high school girl witnesses them stabbing Suk through her door's looking glass. A small backstory of Suk. Suk had always been short-tempered since young. Thus he went through troubles at school many times. However, his father always supported him because his rebellion had fair reasons. His father told him that if he did nothing wrong, then he should be confident. That's the only thing his father taught him. His father worked at a factory, so father and son often used to go home together after work. His father was a good captain, judging from how his colleagues used to treat him. His mother unlived when Suk was very young, so his father raised him alone. It must have been hard, but he never showed it in his face. Suddenly at the factory, Suk notices some smoke. He alerts his father about it. Knowing the danger, they all evacuate the factory. However, some workers still remained inside. His father rushed inside to save them. He went back and forth 5 times to save those 5 workers. His father later unlives due to inhaling that toxic gas so much. They had informed the factory chief to repair the tanks before multiple times, but they did not listen to them to save money from repairing. Now they are blaming the captain, Suk's father, for negligence in supervision. Because as he is gone now and has a little son, he is an easy target to frame the tragic incident on. Suk and everyone there believes his unalive was honorable since he has unlived saving 5 people. Suk now is unliving. He has regrets that he is going away without any purpose in life. Unlike his father, he wishes that he could at least have a job. On the April 4th, he wakes up panting in his apartment room, as if he had a nightmare. He checks his stomach, where he was stabbed earlier, but there was no wound. That day around afternoon, he is smoking in the apartment veranda. The high school girl is shocked to see him alive. Suk thought the girl would ask about the water bill again, but the girl starts sobbing. There are still blood stains there from 3 days ago. The girl asks him if he is really alive. Being confused by such a question, Suk just tells her to come with him because he will give her his share of water bill. At a shop in front of an ATM machine, he is there to cash out from his savings. He is sad that he can hear his credit score drop. The girl taps on the cancel option and takes out his debit card. She asks him why he is using the cash service. Before letting him answer, she breaks the card in half. Suk becomes furious about why she broke it. She asks if he doesn't know that using this kind of service too much will cause his credit scores to drop so low that he will not be able to get a small loan. What kind of person uses this service to pay water bills? She then asks what he is going to eat. It is on her but should not surpass 1300 won. She treats him to ramen. She asks him, even though he has an able body, why he lives like a loser doing nothing. She tells him to work and suggests to not owe each other anything. Then she leaves. but she forgets her textbook on the table. Later, Suk goes to return her textbook. On the way home, those gangster men grab her from behind. They came after her for her father. Then they ask her if she had seen them unaliving her neighbor, Suk, 3 days ago. Suk arrives there. Those two minions are terrified seeing him, as if they saw a ghost. How is he still alive? The girl screams for help. Then one of them punches her in the stomach. She falls down and those two mafia men run off. Suk helps her get up, then he runs after them, despite her trying to stop him. Suk picks up 2 rocks and throws at them, hitting right at their heads. The guy who stabbed Suk last time goes again to stab him. Suk laughs and says that he is doing the same thing as he did in his dream, but Suk gets to protect his stomach using the thick textbook. Suk then kicks and punches him non-stop. As they were fighting under a construction site, heavy pipes and would fall on them from above, making a huge crashing noise. There is no way they can survive such an accident. 2 days later, on the 7th of April, Suk again wakes up in his apartment room. Suk finds it odd. He cannot believe that he had another dream like that. He wonders if he is sick. While browsing the internet, he notices a news. His eyes widen reading it. 2 men died at the construction site. Suk wonders if those dreams were actual realities. He gets up to head to the construction site to check how and what really happened there. Then his phone rings. The person on the call says that they have been trying to reach Suk for 3 days, but he never answered. Suk looks at the calendar. Today is the 7th of April. The person then congratulates him. He is hired at CYT Korea and asks if he can come to the office today. His eyes seem to see a light of hope. At CYT Korea, his boss, whom he will be working under, is showing Suk around the workplace. She says that they have a very flexible working environment. Sitting around all day, stuck on a desk all day doesn't necessarily guarantee high efficiency. So the workers here come and go as they want as long as they do not miss the meetings. Suk asks her if there was no mistake. Why would a company like this even want to hire someone like him? Then she says that she liked how confidently he showed them the middle finger in the interview when they were asking nonsense questions. She then says that choosing him was kind of controversial. The essay Suk wrote in his resume about how he purposely failed his Korean SAT and went to a community college to express his anger towards the system in this country, and about how he quitted his part-time jobs because of some jerk customers and bosses. They thought it was a joke at first, but one person thought this was the most honest essay that reflected Suk's life. Suk asks about the person. The boss says this is a French company and the CEO is also a French. She thinks the CEO could relate to Suk's story. Suk wonders how a foreigner could relate to his life. She continues that 3 years ago, to open a new branch in Korea, CEO came to take training from a big company in Korea. He was really shocked about Koreans' working culture, which does not let employees express themselves, being afraid of the boss, overworking but how low the payment is, the unfair authoritarianism. That is probably why the CEO loved his essay so much. He thinks Suk is someone who is always confident in any situation. She says the CEO has high expectations from him, so does she. Suk suddenly feels confident and charismatically tells her that they will not ever regret hiring a gem like him. On his way home, Suk still cannot believe he got hired into a big company and his boss is a hot woman. He then noticed a man knocking loudly on that high school girl's door. Suk finds the situation familiar, and without thinking much, he punches the man. He falls on the ground. But the man introduces himself that he is a teacher, and he asks Suk if he knows a student named Yerin Cha who lives in this place. Suk immediately apologizes for punching the good teacher. Suk says that he kind of knows the student. What's the matter? The teacher says that she has not come to school for 3 days. He was worried, so he came to check on her. Suk remembers that 3 days ago, he saw her being kidnapped. Suk forcibly tries to open the girl's apartment door. The door opens. Her apartment is in a messy state as if a robber broke in. At that moment, the mafia's minion, one of the guys, who saw Suk unliving, is taken aback to see Suk alive again. The mafia boss has tied up the girl hanging in his base. He decides to sell Yerin to Southeast Asia as revenge and talks about the loser, Suk, who has unlived in the construction site. He says they should dig that guy from the grave and chop him up. The mafia then gets a call. He asks if they have found Yerin's father. Rather, he gets a shocking news that Suk has again survived. Suk is furious. He knows who took Yerin away. Suk and the good teacher go to the police to report a missing case. Suk tells the police everything he knows. but they seem to not want to file the case as Suk did not witness the kidnapping himself. Then suddenly another officer, Detective O, hits Suk's head being mad. What did Suk do this time to be in the police station? He abruptly assumes that he harassed the teacher, thus came to complain. Suk is pissed off. Then the police Detective Han explains everything to the Detective O. He then checks the address of the girl. He asks Suk if he saw her getting kidnapped with his own eyes. Suk becomes furious that they are not believing him. But Detective O does not budge. He orders the police to delete the case report and to send them home. Suk furiously says that the girl was kidnapped. Then Detective O says that Yeren's dad, Hyung Sik Cha, is an alcoholic, so it is not the first time they got this kind of report from that address. He states that it is obvious she ran away from home being frustrated. Detective O is sending the case to the juvenile division as she did not go to school for 3 days. He is basically neglecting this case and brushing them off, saying Yeren is probably just fine. Then Suk and Detective O get into a heated argument. Then Detective Han tries to have a word with Detective O about it. He says it might really be a kidnapping case as that neighborhood is very sketchy and there were 2 unliving victims as well. Detective O says that they don't really know if it is actually a kidnapping case, and filing it as one will cause them trouble because at the beginning of the year, the mayor, the ward chief, and the police chief started increasing surveillance cameras and control agents to make the city crimeless. They have to report the progress next week, so he suggests staying low so that they do not mess up with their promotion. Suk listens to everything. Then he goes berserk there, messing and breaking things up. Then Suk's friend comes to take him away. At Yeren's, the high school girl's apartment room, Suk realizes after telling the police about everything that whatever happened was not a dream. But how is he still alive? He walks around the messy room. When about to leave, he notices Yeren's phone ringing. Suk picks up the call. A call from the kidnapper. Thinking it is Yeren's dad on the call, the mafia boss sends a picture of Yeren hanging tied up. The mafia boss tells him to get the rest of the money and come to his office in front of the station if he does not want his daughter to be sold to Southeast Asia. At the mafia base, the mafia boss plans to sell off Yeren's father's organ as there is no way he can manage that much money. On the other hand, the minion who saw Suk coming back to life, he tells his boss about it, but the boss does not believe him. At that moment, Suk comes in loudly slamming the door, almost breaking it. The minion recognizes him. In panic, he says that he is one who unlived at the construction site 3 days ago. The mafia boss asks, how did he survive such an accident? Suk responds he has revived and swings the metal pipe he brought with him. He swings the pipe and hits one of the minions hard. All the other minions rush at him with bats and sticks in their hands. To everyone's surprise, unlike his confident demeanor, Suk is not good at fighting, so he is getting beaten up real bad now. The mafia boss asks him why he is going so far for the high school girl. Is he dating a minor or something? He says even though he did not want to care about her, he did not even know her name till yesterday. He wants to be a good adult at least. He says that while holding the knife in the mafia's throat which he hid in his pants. The mafia boss says he is aiming at the wrong spot. He cannot unlive him like that. Then he abruptly moves forward, having the knife cut his non-vital spot of the throat, getting Suk off guard. The boss hits Suk's face with his back of the head. The boss grabs the ashtray and breaks it in Suk's head. Suk faints and falls. The mafia boss then orders his men to take Suk in the car. One minion lifts him up and notices that he has metal pads all over his body. The mafia boss and the men are going somewhere, taking Suk behind the car. The minion who was at incident 3 days ago is looking glum. One of the minions asks him about it. He says he does not understand how Suk is still alive after one of him men unlived him. Then the minion says that Sung-hoon, the one who had unlived with Suk 3 days ago, had stabbed Suk about a week ago too, and they dropped Suk in the river. He does not understand how he managed to survive those 2 fatal incidents. In the meantime, Suk in the back manages to light a lighter to burn up the rope tied in his wrist and unties himself. Suk gets up slowly, wraps the rope around that minion's neck and chokes him. The car loses its balance and falls off the bridge. The car behind, where the mafia boss is, he notices the accident. Everyone at the car with Suk unlives. It makes it to the next day's news. The mafia boss is angry that many of his men have been unlived because of Suk. However, the mafia boss is still looking for Yeren's father, but he has not been found. while they are arguing about what to do with Yeren to get rid of their troublesome evidence. Suk slams their door. They cannot believe their eyes. How is he still alive? Suk tells them that he has found out something interesting. On the day of the incident, on the 80th of April, Suk relives the drowning sensation he had when he first unlived. He feels confident that he will be revived again after 3 days. However, what if he cannot revive this time? He panics and tries to get out of the car, but it's too late now. He is unliving. Exactly 3 days later, on the 11th of April, he again woke up in his apartment. He looks at the calendar. He finally believes it that whatever is happening, the phenomenon of him unliving then reviving 3 days later is real. Then he starts laughing as if he's gone mad. Now back to the mafia's base. The boss is furious seeing Suk that all of his men are unlived, but how is he alive? He orders his leftover minions to attack him. But cool and confident Suk tells them to pause. He brings out something that looks like a DIY bomb, lights it with his cigarette and tosses it at them. The mafia boss assumes that it is just a Molotov cocktail, but to their surprise, it is butane fuel gas. It explodes, fire spreads among the men, and the boss is injured. He orders his half of the men to put out the fire and another half to unlive Suk. But Suk has brought more fuel gas with him. He is not scared of anything anymore. He is now lighting up another gas can. He asks if the mafia boss is scared. Suk tells them that he has just started, then tosses another gas can at the mafia boss. Then a strong-looking man, one of his people, slaps it away out of the window. He is pretty intimidating and strong, unlike other minions. Suk is nervous seeing him standing close to him. The guy says he will hand over the teenage girl to him. He tells Suk to follow him. But the mafia boss gets angry at him about making decisions by himself when the mafia boss is standing right there. Then the strong guy tells him to calm down and look out of the window. There are people gathering, some calling the cops because of the commotion here. He says the cops are going to barge in soon. He suggests they make it a simple gas accident. Cops are onto them already because of other accidents, so if they find about the illegal bonds and a kidnapped girl, they are done completely. Suk then sneaks into the conversation with a smirk. Then he confidently tells him to get to the girl, but only the strong guy, referring him as Baldy, can come with him. He wonders where the heck does this guy get so much confidence from. At the place where Yeren is at, there are minions placed there. They start to have bad intentions towards Yeren. One of them even approaches her. When he cuts the ropes tying her legs, she kicks him in the balls and runs off. Suk and the strong guy have come to some remote place. Suk thought they had come to where Yeren is, but the strong guy puts on a brass knuckle and punches Suk in the face. He faints immediately. In the meantime, Yeren is being chased by other minions. While punching Suk non-stop, he realizes that Suk is not breathing anymore. So he gets ready to bury him. A brief backstory of Yeren. Her father business goes into bankruptcy, and they end up in huge debts. So the gangsters keep on barging in, messing things up in their house. Yeren becomes sick of all these, that her father always put up with it, not doing anything about it. He does not even go to the police. So being frustrated, Yeren leaves the house. Later, she could only realize when she was all alone, why her dad had to live like that, why they could not get away from them, and how scary the world can be. There are monsters in this world who cannot possibly be human beings. Yeren is now being chased by such monsters inside a forest. She reaches the highway and comes across a car. She feels relieved seeing the car. She goes by the car window for help, but there was another monster sitting there, the strong guy. He gets out and starts kicking the minions. He is angry that they tried to touch the girl, and now she's trying to run away. Yeren feels hopeless in this situation, that she can never get away from them. Then suddenly the car starts moving, hitting the strong guy. Suk gets out of the car in a bloody appearance. He tells Yeren to not cry anymore, because he is here now. Yeren's eyes see a light of hope. Suk unties the rope and frees Yeren. Yeren then hugs Suk, bursting into tears thanking him. Suk notices the deep marks in her hands caused by the tight ropes. The other two minions call out to their boss, the strong guy who is lying on the ground. They are scared of Suk, who looks like a tough, scary person, with all the blood in his face. They get intimidated by his glare. However, he walks to the car, gets Yeren in and drives away. The minions feel that they are screwed now. The strong guy is staring at the car, pretending to pass out. They reach their apartment. Suk tells her to not think about anything and to just go to bed. and that he is going to the police station now. Yeren says to go to hospital now because of Suk's condition. Suk says not to worry as he does not unlive. Suk passes by the police station. He thinks to himself that the harassment will not be over unless he unlives them. He drags a gas cylinder inside the mafia boss's office. He is determined to blow them all up along with him. However, there is no one at the office. The strong guy suddenly attacks him from behind. Suk blacks out. He wakes up again in his apartment room 3 days later. On the 14th of April, he had unlived that day. He becomes worried about Yeren. He rushes outside and sees her room is locked by the police. A gathering of neighbors in the front. There are news reporters outside of her apartment as if something big happened here. The reporter says, "This is the house of Missa. The house is messy and there are footprints everywhere. It is clear that someone broke into the house." The police believe that this might be directly related to why Miss A jumped out of the roof. Miss A was carried right away to the hospital by paramedics, and currently, her chance of survival is unclear. In the hospital, Suk rushes to her bedchamber. He thinks to himself that it is impossible for her to stay in her room that day because on 11th April, Suk gave Yeren his apartment key. He told her that, as the gangsters know where she lives, it is better to not go to her house that night. There are some cash on his desk, so he told her to take that and hide in a sauna, so it's impossible for her to get caught by them because she was supposed to be at a sauna. He tries to get inside the ICU, where Yeren is at the moment, but nurses do not let him in because of regulation. He does not understand why and how did this happen. On April 11th, Yeren does go to Suk's room as he instructed. She takes the cash like he told her to as well. However, seeing how messy his place was, she gets into her cleaning spree and tidies up the whole room. She then tears up remembering what he has done for her. She is very thankful. Then she hears some noises outside. The mafia men have come to look for her. They are messing up her room next door. Yeren is petrified. They are talking amongst themselves that their people are everywhere looking for her now. Cafe, PC room, sauna, school, police station alley, everywhere. She will get caught tonight for sure. At that critical moment, the landlady comes inside Suk's room to neg about his rent and all. She encounters Yeren inside. She starts shouting why is she at a man's apartment, calling her names, then dragging her out of the room. Listening to such loud noises, the mafia men come out and encounter Yeren. She then runs to the roof. The men chase after her. She cries out for help from the roof. Even though everyone hears the cry for help, they feign ignorance. Even after turning their lights on, they turn them off. The mafia boss arrives there. He asks her if she knows how people like them can still live in the society. He answers, it is because the society lets them do whatever they do. He continues about the people who are not well off. They are too busy securing their own meals to care about others. He says it is a wise way to live because those who do not know their place end up becoming like this, showing her a picture of Suk, probably getting dissolved in the drum of acid. The mafia boss says to blame Suk for what the worst is going to happen to her now. She then gets up and jumps from the roof. The incident is on the news now. Suk is now blaming himself for this. He thinks he was so preoccupied with getting rid of those guys that he did not consider Yeren's safety at all. At the hospital, the big strong guy comes out the elevator while Suk is just leaving in another elevator while blaming himself for the tragedy. He is now standing beside Yeren's bedchamber. The mafia boss was tense about cops knowing. They have gotten rid of all the evidence, but if Yeren wakes up, it will be a big trouble for them. Then the strong guy reassures his boss that he will take care of it. That's why he is here. He is now about to stab Yeren. In the meantime, Suk is on the roof self-blaming while smoking. There are some doctors too taking a break. One of them start complaining about taking Yeren's case because her incident is causing trouble at the hospital, plus she doesn't have a guardian to pay for her hospital bills. He doesn't think she will survive, so he hopes her to just unlive before causing more trouble. Suk becomes angry and is walking towards them to beat them up. Then another doctor scolds them for leaving their patients alone. They ask if it's an emergency or something. The doctor says Yeren's guardian is here. He seems to just assume some random guy who walked inside her room as her guardian, who is bald and tall. Hearing that, Suk rushes down to Yeren's room. He is again self-blaming that he did not consider that those people could come here for her. He opens the door, but no one is there. Turns out there was an emergency alarm that went off earlier, so the bald guy could not unlive her because the nurses came in, and they rushed her to the operating room. That guy is hiding in the side. He gets a call from his boss about the update here. He sees Suk there, alive and well. While the doctor in charge complains about letting her into the operating room as she has no guardian and all, Suk snatches the file from the nurse and signs there as her guardian. He then threatens them to save her. If she unlives, they unlive as well. Suk is walking towards the strong guy. The guy is very shocked to see him. Suk threatens he will take care of them one by one, breaking them into pieces. The bald guy is taken aback seeing Suk very alive and well standing in front of him, when he himself unlived him and dissolved his body with his own hands few days ago. Then a nurse intervenes and tells Suk, as Yaren's guardian, to come with her to the reception and talk about the procedures. Suk is heading there. He tells the bald guy to just leave for today as Suk is busy now. He will destroy all of them soon anyway. Suk is sitting beside Yaren's bed. He noticed how clean his apartment is earlier. He figured that Yaren stayed there to clean. It was dangerous for her to stay there for too long. He tears up saying that that was stupid. The doctors have told him that Yaren's organs were seriously injured and was bleeding a lot, so they told him to be prepared for the worst-case scenario. Suk becomes frustrated that Yaren does not deserve any of these. Why does she have to suffer and unlive because of them? Then he gets a message from his workplace, the CYT Korea. The orientation will start at 1 p.m. tomorrow. Suk forgot that he has a job now. He feels the need for a change now. He goes to a hair salon. He tells the hairdresser to give him a look that will make him look stronger. Suk goes to his workplace with his new red hair look earlier than scheduled. He hands over his resignation papers to his boss, as he won't be able to work there anymore. His boss is surprised as he looked like someone who really needed the job, but he is resigning now before even starting. He tells her that he has something to take care of first. At the gangster's place, he is now entering their base holding a hammer. They can unlive unlike Suk, so he is determined to show them how unfair it is to be able to unlive. At the mafia office, the bald minion informs his boss that Suk is still alive. He realizes if Suk is alive that it would be pointless to just get rid of Yaren. The boss doubts if his bald minion really unlived him back then. He says he had unlived him with his own hands and even checked well later. He thinks there is something weird about him. Suk has already been unlived twice before by their men, and this is the fourth time he came back to life. The boss says if Suk is actually Jesus Christ or something. Then the boss gets a call from a man named Minhyuk Kim. Seeing that he starts to sweat, he is too nervous to pick up the call. Mr. Kim says he is enjoying the news lately, implying he is not pleased with what they are doing now. The man orders the boss to meet him because he has something to tell him. The boss is scared and nervous. He says he is screwed that Mr. Kim wants to meet him. The bald man calmly says that it is okay. He measures his boss that everything will be taken care of today. He says he will not unlive Suk this time. He is going to torture him to find out what he really is, then grind him and feed him to the pigs. The boss orders to make Suk feel the pain a human being can feel. The mafia boss is now on his way to get into his car to meet Mr. Kim. At that moment, Suk hits him in the head from behind. He falls on the ground. Suk asks him what took him so long to come down here. He has been waiting. Suk ties the boss up and drives his car to go somewhere. When the boss making a fuss inside the car, Suk again hits his head telling him to read the room. Suk says he has thought really hard last night. He figured that it will not end if he just keeps attacking them randomly, so he has decided to get rid of them one by one, starting from the head, the mafia boss. Suk tells him that he should be more worried because he will make him suffer much more than the teenager Yaren has suffered. The boss laughs at this. He mocks him saying his men are already following him. Suk did not notice them following their car. The boss says it is because he installed a tracking app in there and his phone, which he initially installed to keep his eye on his minions. Suk speeds up. The boss says that this is pointless as he is surely going to get caught and all. Then this time Suk laughs and says he cannot believe things are going so well like this for him. Surprised, boss asks what does he mean by things are going well? Then Suk abruptly stops over the highway bridge. The cars following it bumps into the car real hard, causing a massive accident. Ordinary civilian cars start to gather there. They notice that almost all of them are severely wounded or have unlived. Suk is dragging the boss by his hair. Suk thought they all be unlived together, but the boss's imported car's airbag worked well to save them. Suk say that thanks to his tracking app, he got to unlive all of his men. Now he has to think how he is going to unlive the boss, while dragging him towards the edge of the bridge. Suk says that Yaren fell from such a height and is now at a hospital cause of him. It is only fair if he does the same to him. Suk is pushing him at the edge. Terrified boss makes plea that he will not go after Yaren anymore. He also offers him money, as much he wants, then Suk punches him. He says they should not have harassed her in the first place. The boss says they knew the family do not have any more money, but they did what their boss told them to do. CEO Kim, the man told them to deal with Yaren's father. Suk is getting tired of his yapping and pushes him more to the edge. At that moment, the bald man stabs Suk on his shoulder. Suk somehow gets himself together and hits the bald man in the head with a wrench. Suk almost forgot about this tough bald man, so he thinks if he gets rid of these two now, it will be all over. Then Suk swings the wrench at him, but he dodges it. Then he lands a punch on Suk's face. He swings the knife at his face, cutting his face. Suk is very unfazed about it and glims a smile at him. The bald man is taken aback by this. The mafia boss then suddenly moves the bald man to stab Suk, but the bald man blocks the striking knife with his arm. Getting stabbed in the process, he tells his boss that something is wrong with Suk. Then they notice ordinary citizens there are taking videos and pictures of them. Suk laughs that they are done now. His minions are all gone and their faces are all over the internet. Things cannot get any better. The bald man thinks to himself that all of that about him coming back to life was just his delusion. Nobody can come back to life after unliving once. He goes to stab Suk again. But to his surprise, Suk jumps from the bridge. He says with a smile while falling from the bridge that he will see them again in 3 days. Those two stabbing video clips spread all over the country. So does Suk's jumping from the bridge video clip, making a news. The police suspect that they are the gangsters based in Jongyang, a place in Seoul. Police has decided to ask for the public's help to find the suspects. Mr. Kim hears the news. He seems annoyed. He orders his secretary, Chief Cho, to find the mafia boss and his bald man before the police do. The wanted flyers of the boss and his bald man is everywhere. The mafia boss is on the move to flee the country through a smuggling boat. He is now waiting for his bald man to come with his money. The boss gets mad because his man arrives there late with the money and a gun. The boss again gets angry that that was not all the money he possessed. The bald man says that is all he could withdraw because the cops have blocked all the accounts under their name. The mighty mafia boss is frustrated how and why he has ended up like this. He is furious at Suk. Then upon seeing the gun inside the money bag, he questions why. The bald man says that the smugglers are more ruthless than they are, who are gangsters. Betraying people on the boat and unliving them is just a daily routine for them, so he brought a gun just in case, for his boss's safety. They are heading to the smuggling boat which is coming in 10 minutes. The boss asks his bald man if he wants to come with him too. The bald man says their boys are all in hospital right now, so someone has to stay behind to keep their mouths shut, and he also wants to see Suk to the end. Then he gets a call from the boss's phone, whose gold-rimmed smartphone has been lost. When the boss whines about losing his phone, the bald man lies to him that the police have found them. He says he will lure them away so the boss can leave safely. Then he runs in the opposite direction. He knows what's up. Turns out Suk had the boss's phone, and he has tracked them through the tracker installed there. Suk has again resurrected. Suk asks where the boss is, and he has come to return his phone. The bald man says he was just unlucky that he did not know there was a person who could come back to life from unliving in 3 days. Suk says he wants to correct him that it is not him just being unlucky. They caused all these. If they had not tried to harass Yaren, Suk would not have found out about this power he has. Then Suk brings out a wrench from his suit and rushes at him, but the bald man shoots him non-stop. Suk falls on the ground. Pointing the gun in his face, he tells Suk that if he destroys his cerebellum, he will not be able to move at all forever, but he would not unlive. Then he can neither unlive nor live. The mafia boss arrives at the port, where the smuggling boat is. The smugglers mock him about how a powerful mafia like him ended up like this. He gets annoyed and threatens to beat them up. Then he hands them over 30 million won. Looking at the gun inside the bag, he feels assured and relieved. He asks them if there will be any problem. They reassure him about it that Chinese are waiting for them at the southern high seas. Once the boat starts departing, the boss can just take a nap until it arrives at Shanghai. After that, he can get on the trade ship to the Philippines and say goodbye to Korea. The smuggler boss orders his men to take good care of him on the boat as the mafia boss is a very important guest. The boat departs. The smuggler boss phones Chief Cho, CEO Kim's secretary. On the phone, he says that he has set it up as she has ordered them and tells her to give his best regards to the CEO Kim, while grinning. In the meantime, the bald man and Suk are fighting. While lying on the ground with the bald man's foot in his face, Suk tells him that he talks too much. The bald man should have just shot him instead of babbling. The bald man then responds that he has enough bullets anyway. Suk forcibly moves the arm away which was pointing the gun at him, then hits the bald man's injured arm with his wrench. Suk gets up but falls again because of the pain from the gunshot. He cannot feel his body. The bald man is walking towards him. Suk says he is done for today, then brings out a knife and stabs his neck to unlive himself. He will come back again in 3 days anyway. The bald guy quickly checks his pulse. Suk has not unlived yet. The bald man tries to stop his bleeding, but to his surprise, Suk sprays lighter fluid on the bald man's face. Suk chuckles saying his unlive act was fake, cannot really waste a life now, can he? Then he lights the bald man on fire. In desperation to live, the bald man jumps in the sea. After putting off the fire, he tries to get back on the port, but he sees a gun pointing at him. Suk also lights himself on fire and now, he is pointing the gun at the bald man. When Suk is about to shoot the baldy man, the mafia boss's boat comes across them, him staring at them. The mafia boss is sweating and his cigarette falls from his mouth. Suk then steps on the baldy man's bald head to get on that boat, while his body is still on fire. Suk falls on the boat and quickly takes his burning shirt off. Suk asks the mafia boss where he is going. He needs to finish what he has started. The mafia boss brings out the gun and shoots at him. Suk dodges this time. He is annoyed that the boss also has a gun. The smuggler men inside the boat hear the commotion happening outside, hearing that they start to set up a bomb inside quickly instead of waiting for another hour as their leader previously instructed them to, and they get out of the boat quickly. While shooting, the mafia boss runs out of ammo. Suk then shoves his gun inside the boss's mouth. Suk tells him that he should not shoot with one hand. This is what he should do to aim properly. The bald man suddenly gets on the boat and headlocks Suk. Suk's grip loses the gun. The mafia boss picks it up and orders his bald man to hold Suk properly. He says he is going to unlive him for real this time. The bald man shouts to not do it because Suk will come back again. However, the mafia boss fires aimlessly and shoots his bald man along with Suk. They both fall in the river. The mafia boss seems to not even care about his own men. He is alive anyway. That's all that matters. He is relieved that even if Suk resurrects, he will not be in Korea by then and laughs. Suk is about to blank out, but he opens his eyes. He cannot unlive today. If he does, he loses 3 days. He cannot let the mafia boss win like this. He swims up. The explosives inside the boat explodes. Now it is on fire. He shouts, "Who did this?" At that moment, CEO Kim is grinning in his office. Inside the burning boat, the mafia boss is still alive, trying to survive there. He runs inside the enclosed area. No smuggler men were there as they were supposed to be. He tries to call 911 for help, but CEO Kim responds to the call. Mr. Kim says that it has been a while since he asked the mafia boss to meet him. He then says because of the mafia boss, he realized that he's been letting his guard down too much these days. He adds that he trusted someone who could not even take care of some minor task. The mafia boss then tells Mr. Kim that he can explain himself, that he was not trying to run away. If Mr. Kim saves him, he will make sure to unlive that girl. Mr. Kim tells him that he is not holding on to that girl anymore. There was only one thing he was worried about, that is if the public found out the relationship between the CEO Kim of the Down Group and a lower-class mafia boss. Mr. Kim just wants to prevent that from happening. He asks the mafia boss what to do now, unliving the girl or unliving the mafia boss. He says he unlives the mafia boss now rather than unliving the girl who's already at a hospital. There are still bombs exploding. Mr. Kim tells him something about Mr. Hyung-sik Cha, Yeren's father, whom the mafia boss was ordered to search for. The mafia boss's eyes widened. He starts to cuss Mr. Kim, furiously hearing whatever Mr. Kim has told him about Yeren's father. Then the boat explodes and it starts to sink. The boat has completely sunk before Suk's eyes. Suk also drowns, saying it is all over now. He is relieved that no one will bother Yeren anymore. Yeren in hospital goes into cardiac arrest. While drowning, Suk wishes to share his resurrection ability with Yeren, as much as she needs. On this side, Yeren's condition is getting worse. Then she suddenly opens her eyes and tears up thinking of her Mr. Suk. Today is April 18th. 3 days later, on the 21st of April, Suk's apartment room is empty. The news says the 20 gang members that were involved with Yaren's falling incident have been arrested. The news refer Yaren as Miss A. We then see that Yaren is watching this on the news, and the nurse alongside her tells her that it is good that those evil criminals got arrested. Yaren says that despite all that, she still isn't happy. She should be happy that the people who got her and her family are now caught, but she's still worried Mr. Suk, who was being tortured. As she is about to say something, that is when the doctor comes into the room and asks Nurse Sue if she was able to contact Yaren's guardian, to which Nurse Sue said that she tried, but to no avail. This shocks Yaren, as the doctor bickers about how careless this guardian of hers is, and how he is gone and started ignoring them at such a crucial point. A shocked Yaren then asks the doctor and Nurse Sue about who they are referring to as her guardian, because her father, who is her guardian, is currently missing, so who are they referring to as her guardian? The doctor then gets confused by her sudden questioning, and tells her that they were referring to the man who lives next door to her. This shocks Yaren once again. Later in, we see that Yaren looks very sad, and Nurse Sue tells her that they should get her temperature checked for evaluation. However, Yaren is still stuck up about what happened to Mr. Suk and doesn't respond to her. Nurse Sue understands her situation and empathizes with her. She also asks Yaren if she is still worried about her next-door neighbor, and tells her that it should be fine, and that there must be some reason as to why he hasn't come to the hospital to see her. Right then, we see the news on television doing a breaking news broadcast. On the broadcast, it is said that the gangster, Mr. Jung, who was supposedly the leader of the many people who were arrested earlier in the day, was found without life near the port. It is assumed that the boat he was on, while trying to escape South Korea, had suddenly exploded, and that is what caused his demise. Another news coming out of that was that a man's, assumed to be in his 20s, body was also found lifeless in that scene. Looking at his body, the police are suspecting that he was shot, as he has several gunshot wounds in his body, alongside other injuries. This news totally breaks down Yaren as a whole. We see then that the time and days keep passing by, but Yaren was still her broken down and depressed self, as she is losing will to go on. We then see that it is night time on the 21st of April, and the nurse, Ms. Sue, tells Yaren to go to sleep and greets her off. However, Yaren stops her and tells her that there is something that she wants from Sue. Later on, we see that she had made the request for Ms. Sue to take her to the apartment she lives in. We then see that Nurse Sue has driven her there. We then see that they are going upstairs to where Yaren and Mr. Suk's flats were located. Nurse Sue tries to tell Yaren that they should go back now, and that she should rest her body now. However, Yaren wants to stay a little longer. We then see Yaren standing before Mr. Suk's door and hesitantly opening it up. As she does open it, Yaren thinks about the dream she had before waking back up. Yaren thinks of how she was drowning in that dream, drowning into nothingness. It was a free fall and there was nothing stopping her. But she was then caught by a hand. The hand belonged to Mr. Suk, who told her that she needs to stop sleeping and wake up. He told her that she is not a kid, she is a high schooler, and she should mature up and act like one. Mr. Suk then picked her up and went down into that nothingness himself. Yaren then says that after she woke up, she had the feeling that she could never see her mister again. We then see that the flat is empty too, and Yaren breaks into tears seeing that, and tells Nurse Sue that they should probably go back now. As she walks back while crying, Yaren knew what had been done. She knew that Mr. Suk had sacrificed himself for her, to give her life. She realizes that for her life, Mr. Suk had to give up his own. However, at that very moment, we see that Yaren's Mr. pass her by, which leaves her bamboozled. Mr. Suk makes a call to the hospital and tells them that he is the guardian to Cha Yaren and gets to know that she woke up. Right then, an emotional Yaren calls out to him. Mr. Suk looks back at Yaren and asks her if she's fine and how did she get here. Yaren is still in a state of shock, so she asks Mr. Suk if he really is her mister, to which Mr. Suk says that it's a bit rude of her to forget his face after 2 to 3 days of not seeing each other. Yaren still can't believe it, so Mr. Suk states that it could be possible that she doesn't recognize him because of the brand new hairstyle. We then see Yaren running towards him and embracing him in a tight hug. Yaren gets emotional and starts crying, while Mr. Suk smiles and tells her that it's okay and not to cry. We then see in a building a woman is conducting a presentation for someone. She says that according to her research, she found that the police had reported to the media that an unidentified 20-year-old man's body was found at the port, alongside Mr. Young. She says that it is almost certain that the man is none other than Cha Hyung-sik's neighbor. She then presents the CCTV footage they secured from Inhwan Capital, and there it shows that Mr. Suk had gone to their office to attack the people inside it. However, as shown in the footage, his attack didn't work out well, and he was beaten up pretty badly by Kong YJ. Then it's shown that Kong YJ had surely gotten rid of him for good by torturing him. However, to their surprise, the man had came back a few days later, this time with a new hairstyle. He taunted the group into attacking him, and he ended up taking his own life there. But recently, she learned that the same man was spotted alongside the daughter of Cha Hyung-sik at the hospital she was admitted to. CEO Kim listened to all this and asks Assistant Minister Jo if she believes in ghosts and miracles, to which Assistant Jo gets confused. CEO Kim, however, is amused, and he says that he thinks the Mr. Suk might have the ability to come back to life when he passes away. We then see that a few days after all of this, Cha Yerin is now healthy enough to get discharged from the hospital. Nurse Sue says that she really enjoyed talking to and taking care of Yerin, and also asks if Yerin is going to leave with the handsome guardian of hers, referring to Mr. Suk. Yerin gets a bit flustered up and says that she plans on going alone, and then surprises Mr. Suk. Later, we see that Yerin has arrived to the place where she lives, and instead of going to her flat, she instead goes to see Mr. Suk instead. However, as she enters the room, all she sees is a very messed up place. The place is dirty, the utensils are all dirty, cigarette butts are stored up in the room, and Mr. Suk is sleeping in an unorganized bed. Yerin understands that this was the reason why he didn't come out when she was waiting outside. Yerin then checks the time to see that it was already 3:30 p.m., and Mr. Suk was supposed to receive her at 3 p.m. at the hospital. We then see Mr. Suk moved in his sleep and touched his crotch, which embarrasses Yerin, who was watching, and she immediately went out of the room. Yerin was then pissed at herself for even thinking that a man like Mr. Suk was likable and somewhat handsome. Yerin then decides to go back to her own flat and clean up there, because when she left, the house was very untidy and a mess. Suddenly, as she touches the doorknob, all the memories of how messed up her house was, the damage and everything come back to Yerin, and she says that those memories occasionally come back to haunt her. However, Yerin musters up the courage to open the door, and what she sees leaves her very surprised. Yerin sees that the house is perfectly clean and tidy. The broken appliances have been switched with good ones, and even the broken windows have been fixed. Yerin wonders just who could have done such a thing for her. Yerin then hears a loud noise, and she realizes that Mr. Suk had woken up from his sleep. Mr. Suk talks about how he is late, and how the high schooler would be pissed at him for not going to take her in time. Mr. Suk also wonders just why did he stay up all night, cleaning the mess inside of Cha Yerin's house, when his own house is an untidy mess. Hearing this, Yerin giggles a little, and we then see that Mr. Suk rushes out of his flat to go to the hospital, but sees that Cha Yerin has already come. Yerin then gives a big smile to him and tells him that she's back. After that, we see that Yerin has cooked a lot of food and they're having it together with each other. Mr. Suk says that she didn't have to do all this, because he planned on buying things for her. Yerin replied by saying that she doesn't want to eat from a man who can't even pay his own bills, and advises him to eat homemade food from time to time instead of having instant ramen like he always does. Mr. Suk then starts eating, and this gets Yerin nostalgic about how her father used to eat here as well. Mr. Suk praises Yerin's cooking a lot, saying that she is a one-of-a-kind chef. They lay down after they're done eating, and both of them admit to eating a little too much for their own good. Yerin then gets a call from someone, and we learn that she has an interview coming up a day later. Mr. Suk says that Yerin is getting popular and that she might become an idol, but Yerin gets offended by this as she is only doing this to find her dad, and giving interviews on TV will take her a long way in achieving that. Yerin then talks about how her father was dumb and trusted bad people. However, in actuality, it's not his fault, he was a nice guy. It's the fault of those who took advantage of him. She also says that she regrets saying all the bad stuff she said to him, and wants to make up for that. After this, Mr. Suk says that he will be going then, but before leaving, he says that Yerin can knock on him if she wants to eat with someone. Yerin likes the idea and tells Mr. Suk that they can eat together more often now that they've got time on their hands. As the door is opened, a policeman comes inside and asks them if Yerin is there. Yerin introduces herself to the police, and the police reply by telling her to come to the police station with him. This confuses everyone a bit, but the police then drops a bombshell regarding Yaren's father. Is it good? Is it bad? Who knows? The story continues, and we see that Cha Yaren is being questioned by the media about her father. The media asks about how Yaren's father passed away and his body being found near a mountain. They also talk about how has said that it is assumed by the police that it was a case of Mr. Cha taking his own life, and asks Cha Yaren if she agrees with that assessment from the police. Yaren doesn't really have anything to say as she is traumatized beyond limits, so she stays quiet, but the people of the media keep forcing questions in to keep asking her. They ask her about how the body's condition was, as it is assumed that the body had passed away about a month ago, and they ask what Yaren feels about all this. As Yaren stays quiet under pressure, we see that Mr. Suk has arrived to the scene with a bucket of water in his hands. Mr. Suk then goes on to berate the news media and the reporters for forcing all these things on an already depressed girl. Mr. Suk questions their humanity before throwing the water from the bucket on to everyone. Damaging their equipments, he tells them to get lost. We then learn that Yaren's father's body was found in the Umeong Mountains. His body was left hanging under a tree with a will placed underneath his feet. The police has assumed that Mr. Chaz took away his own life because of the immense pressure and torture by the gangsters who were messing with him. Further investigation and reports have started that he had passed away in the month of April. We then see that a funeral is being held by Mr. Suk and Cha Yaren for Mr. Cha, and Mr. Suk thinks about how he was the one who single-handedly prepared the funeral of his own father. However, as he looks around and sees how not a single person was there, he understands that this is a very lonely time for Yaren. Yaren then speaks up, asking Mr. Suk if he feels the loneliness. She further goes on to add that this is what happens to a businessman once his business fails. We then see a flashback where we see that Mr. Cha is very enthusiastic about a work project, and he promises someone to build them an apartment as soon as possible. The person then asks Cha to join him for dinner. However, Cha refuses, stating that he has a date with his daughter. Back in the current time, Yaren talks about how despite being a businessman, her father never neglected her and always put her as the first priority, and maybe that caused him a lot of trouble in his work life. However, never once did he regret doing so. However, whenever he did get work, it was special because he would commit himself working all the time for it. Just like that, Mr. Cha got the deal to make the apartment, and Yaren says that it ruined her entire family's life forever. We then see another flashback, where a young Cha Yaren is on the phone with her father, and she tells him that she is bringing lunch for him at work, to which Mr. Cha tells her not to, saying he has already ate. Yaren tells him that it's fine, but she's going to bring it anyway, and he can consume it for snacks later. However, Mr. Cha keeps telling her not to come anywhere near his workplace and stay where she is. However, by that time Yaren had already almost reached him, and upon reaching there, what she says there leaves her shocked, as she sees a bunch of gangsters beating up everyone at her father's office. She also notices that her own father was being beat up by a gangster. However, he was still trying to contact her in the phone, but this angers the gangster, as he beats up Mr. Cha even more, saying that it's disrespectful of him to pick a call during an important meeting between them. We then see the gangsters telling the people of the company that they should either finish him off or leave the job, otherwise they won't be leaving. We then learn that the gangsters pretend to be normal citizens during these problems to stay out of trouble. Seeing all this happening in front of her, Cha Yaren was left traumatized. However, this continued for the next 3 years. We see Mr. Cha begging to the person in charge of handling these things to give him 3 or even 2 months more time, and that he will get the job done. However, the person says that these things are no longer in his hands, and that there is nothing he can do to change the mind of the people in power, and informs Mr. Cha that it was over. Then, because he couldn't complete the job, the company sued Mr. Cha, and his building company went bankrupt and they hit a financial low, so they had to move out from their usual home to a rundown place. When they were moving away, Yaren noticed that the building her father was working in was already completed, so she understood that it only meant that the company were in cahoots with the gangsters to get this done as cheaply. In exchange, the company sold their loan to the gangster, so now the gangsters would bother her father for money. And it was then that her father lost all feelings to move forward in life. Back to the current time, Yaren says that she constantly asked her father about what that company was about, but he never told her about it, and this made her hate him. But she now understands that he only did it to protect her, and it's because of her rough behavior that pushed him to take his life, so she should be blamed for it. Saying this, Yaren starts crying out. Mr. Suk is sad seeing Yaren in this state, and wonders why is it always that the victims suffer and the ones who actually caused it get away with it. Just then we see someone coming to pay respect to Mr. Cha, and he does so. After paying his respects, the person is about to leave, and before leaving, he tells Cha Yeren that she is still so young, so it is even more saddening than normal. We see that he is wearing the same smartwatch as the person who used to work with Mr. Cha. He then introduces himself as someone who used to work with her father, named Kim Min-hyuk of the Daeun Group, the CEO from before. We then see that the name Daeun Group rings a bell for Cha Yeren. Later on, we see Kim Min-hyuk, Mr. Suk, and Yeren seated together, and Yeren asks Min-hyuk if her father really worked for such a big company like Daeun Group, who are known to build state-of-the-art hotels and resorts. Kim Min-hyuk says that he had worked with Yeren's father a long time ago, back when he was still just a normal manager on a project for the Daeun constructions. Min-hyuk further says that Yeren's father bad exceeded their expectations by a lot, and thanks to that, he managed to be promoted to director thanks to the extraordinary performance of Mr. Cha, which is why he always wanted to meet him and thank him for everything. However, he never expected that this would be the way that he will end up meeting him again. Min-hyuk says that he heard a lot about Cha Yeren from Mr. Cha. Mr. Cha always talked about Yeren with a smile, and always put her as the first priority when it came to everything. We then get to learn that it was Kim Min-hyuk's invitation which Mr. Kim had rejected years ago to take out his daughter on a date. Min-hyuk continues, saying that it is because of his immense love for his daughter that makes it even hard for him to believe that Mr. Cha would just suddenly leave the world one day, and not to mention he would leave by taking his own life. He says this with a slightly taunting vibe, which stings Cha Yeren. Min-hyuk then puts his hand inside his suit to bring out an envelope, which he puts on the table and tells Cha Yeren that he wishes the best for her before getting up and taking his leave. As Min-hyuk is leaving, Yeren opens the envelope which he had left for her, and sees that it includes a check worth 50 million Korean won. Seeing this, Cha Yeren calls out to Min-hyuk, telling him to stop. Min-hyuk stops and turns back, and Yeren tells him that she wants to return the envelope to him. Yeren says that while she is grateful that he wants to help her out in her current dire situation, the amount which he is giving off to her is too large an amount and it will be too burdensome for her, which is why she wants to return it, saying that she will be taking care of her own problems and that she doesn't want to live under anyone else's debts. Min-hyuk gets serious hearing this from Yeren, and asks her why would she be considering this as living under someone's debt. Min-hyuk says that the victims of such tragedies should try to be compensated as much as possible. Meanwhile, the criminals should pay for their crimes and should be punished. However, with how fickle the society is, it always makes the victims suffer more and more pain for no reason whatsoever. Hearing this, Mr. Suk seems touched, as he had the exam thought not long ago. Min-hyuk continues by saying that as he was a part of the adults who build this society, he is just making up for his own faults by giving her the money. Min-hyuk then bows down and tells Cha Yeren to please accept the money from him. We then see that Min-hyuk is leaving. However, before he leaves, Min-hyuk takes a good look at Mr. Suk, before finally leaving. Mr. Suk also thinks of him with a lot of curiosity, with his name being a key point of interest to him. We then see that Kim Min-hyuk is in his car, sitting beside his secretary, Ms. Jo. There, Ms. Jo tells Min-hyuk that it doesn't look like to her that he was beaten up or had any water thrown at him, which means that Mr. Cha didn't hand over those important documents to Cha Yeren, because if he had done so, then Min-hyuk would have gotten involved and those things would have happened to him. Min-hyuk says that it was as expected. There was no reason for Mr. Cha to hand it over to Cha Yeren and out his own daughter's well-being into danger. Secretary Jo then asks Min-hyuk what was even his reason to go out to the funeral then. Min-hyuk then answers in a cold tone, saying that there is just something about being able to help the family, that he himself destroyed, the feeling that makes him feel so superior that he can't quite put into words for her to understand. Secretary Jo says that there must be definitely more to it than just that, as Min-hyuk definitely also would have wanted to meet Suk Suk-hwan. Just at that moment, Mr. Suk himself came in front of Min-hyuk's car to force stop it. The driver gets mad at him for doing so, but Mr. Suk ignores that and goes to meet Kim Min-hyuk. Mr. Suk asks Min-hyuk about what he said about punishing the criminals, because there is one such criminal that Mr. Suk knows of that needs to be punished no matter what, and Mr. Suk wants his help in punishing that guy. Min-hyuk is a bit overwhelmed. Even though he is face to face with Mr. Suk, he can't help but feel awkward knowing that Suk has the ability to come back to life every time he is finished off. Min-hyuk then tells Mr. Suk to get inside his car. After that, Min-hyuk wonders if he should check if the ability of Mr. Suk is real by finishing him off by himself. We then see that Min Hyuk, Secretary Joe, and Mr. Suk have made it to a luxurious hotel bar. Upon arriving there, Mr. Suk asks just what kind of place have they come to and why, and Min Hyuk responded to that by saying that this is one of the bars owned by the Daeun Group, and that he made a reservation beforehand so that they can talk freely. Then they all sit down, and Min Hyuk asks Mr. Suk to tell him about that person who he said needs to be punished at all costs. Mr. Suk then tells Kim Min Hyuk about everything that happened with Mr. Cha and Cha Yerin from the beginning. Min Hyuk listens to this and says that it's really shameful that they had to go through these, and reconfirms that if the person who did this was the one who Mr. Suk wants to punish, to which Suk says yes. Mr. Suk then asks Min Hyuk if he has any idea of who could have done that sort of thing to Mr. Cha, because after all, they've worked together before in the past. This leads to a moment of awkward silence between them all, as Min Hyuk doesn't know what to say regarding this topic. Mr. Suk then takes a sip of the drink in hand and says that the only reason he is asking them this is because they are in the same line of business, so maybe they're aware of some rumors that can connect to this. Mr. Suk then suddenly flusters as he realizes just how good the alcohol he just drank is, and he asks the bartender what is the name of the drink, to which the bartender tells him that it's a 1964 bicentenary, which is a type of whiskey which is sold for 320,000 won per cup. This shocks Mr. Suk as he can't believe that such a drink, which is more expensive than his rent, can exist. Mr. Suk then realizes that he is behaving inappropriately and apologizes to Min Hyuk, saying that he got carried away by the drink. Min Hyuk ignores this and instead continues on by saying that it's very common for companies to hire gangsters to keep the construction dealers in their toes. It is more common than most people think, and that they mostly do it so that they can get their building built for the least amount of money possible. However, he adds that in case of Cha Yerin and her family, it seems like the stuff was even worse because it seems like the gangsters were involved from the very beginning. Min Hyuk then grins and says that he has a company in mind, but he first wants to ask Mr. Suk just what would he do if he found out who did it. Mr. Suk is confused by this as the answer is obvious to him. He says that he will crush everyone in that company for doing what they did. Min Hyuk then speaks up and says that it's best for him to not meddle with those people, because they're extremely rich and hold incredible influence everywhere, and for them, the gangsters are willing to do anything. Min Hyuk further adds that while what happened to Cha Yerin's father is sad, but if a normal guy like Suk tries to mess with them, it will do no good, and will bring forth even more problems for them. Mr. Suk doesn't like this and asks Min Hyuk about the stuff he said to Cha Yerin then, the stuff about unfairness towards the victims, and Min Hyuk replies to this by saying that he said it to her that way because Yerin is a student, she doesn't know about how the world operates. He didn't want to tell the bitter truth to a high school kid. However, Mr. Suk is an adult, so he should definitely understand this better. Mr. Suk scoffs at this and says that Min Hyuk is a lot different from what he had thought of him as, and Min Hyuk replies by saying that Suk is a lot different to what he had hoped as well. We then see Mr. Suk getting mad and asking the bartender to change his drink with a cheaper drink in soju, as the expensive stuff doesn't fit him at all. He then takes the entire bottle of soju and gulps it down, before telling Min Hyuk that the people who harmed Yerin are probably feeling the same. They have money, they have influence, so of course they'll be able to crush a normal man who drinks soju. Mr. Suk then asks Min Hyuk if knowing people like that exist disgust him. Mr. Suk then gets up and walks away, saying that Min Hyuk doesn't need to tell him who he thinks did it, and that he will find them himself and that he will find them quick and beat them up, because he can't go to sleep while being this mad. Min Hyuk then speaks up and tauntingly says that it won't be easy to beat them up like how it was easy to beat up the Jinhwan Corps. This shocks Suk Hwan, as he doesn't understand how Min Hyuk knows about all this. Right then, Secretary Joe gets out a blade and chops down the back of the neck of Suk, which takes him down, and a pool of blood forms. Min Hyuk tells Suk Hwan that no such thing as unfair exists in this world and that it all depends on who is strong and who is weak, and that Cha Hyung Suk didn't know that, which is why he lost his life. This leaves Mr. Suk baffled, and he asks Min Hyuk what he means, to which Min Hyuk replies by saying that he was the one who took the life of Cha Yerin's father. He says that he did that not because of the apartment construction, nor was it because of him understanding that he hired gangsters. Nope, if that was the case he would have let him go. He took his life because he knew something very important, something he shouldn't have known. Kim Min Hyuk then asks Mr. Suk Hwan if he would like to know what that important thing did Cha Hyung Suk figured out before he was finished off for good. As Kim Min Hyuk is about to elaborate on this topic, Mr. Suk tells him that he doesn't care about all that, and that what matters is that Min Hyuk was the one who took Mr. Cha's life. Min Hyuk says that it's true that he did, But it was all the fault of Cha Hyung-suk, because if only he had just known his role and kept his mouth shut, he would have been spared with his life. Instead, he tried to do something that he could never handle, and it cost him his life, and it almost cost Cha Yerin her life too. Mr. Suk was seething in anger as he heard this, but he didn't have the necessary strength to pull off anything after being slashed by a knife. Min Hyuk continued, saying that Cha Hyung-suk did all this just so he could teach Min Hyuk a lesson. We then see a flashback as Mr. Cha was being hung. He was still defiant, and he said that he is doing all this just so he could teach Min Hyuk that there are a few things in this world to which money has no worth when put into comparison. Kim Min Hyuk then continues on with his monologue. He says that Mr. Suk needs to understand that there are things in this world which are impossible to do, even if you are someone who is capable of coming back to life. He says this to taunt Mr. Suk. Mr. Suk hears this and feels shocked knowing that Min Hyuk is aware of his abilities. However, he then starts laughing as he slowly starts to get back to his feet. Mr. Suk then grabs a hold of Kim Min Hyuk, which triggers Secretary Jo. However, Min Hyuk signs her to not get involved. Mr. Suk then tells Min Hyuk that he is now interested in what he said, and that he would love to know if there are things that are impossible to do even if one is capable of coming back to life. Mr. Suk then says that after he wakes back up, Min Hyuk is going to see something that's absolutely outrageous from then onwards. A few moments later, we see the lifeless carcass of Mr. Suk on the ground, in a pool of his own blood. Secretary Jo goes to check up on him, and she checks up on the back of his neck to find that there's no nerves on him, and that he has well and truly passed away. Secretary Jo then asks Kim Min Hyuk just what should they do with Sukwan's body and think about the cleanup procedure, but we see in the background that Min Hyuk is clutching onto his chest, and he is having difficulty to talk or even move around properly. Secretary Jo notices this, and she quickly goes forward to help out Min Hyuk. We see that Min Hyuk's heart rate has gone up and hit 128, and this serious thumping is causing the issues. Secretary Jo then gives him some medicine pills, and after taking those pills, Min Hyuk finally calms down. Secretary Jo then tells Min Hyuk to take care of his health and take medicines properly. Min Hyuk says that all is well, and that it was just a minor inconvenience caused by him getting a little too excited for his own good. Min Hyuk then tells Secretary Jo tell the people who are managing the hotel to leave this all on its own and not change anything. He also wants them to install cameras in the room so that they can see how and if Sukwan reincarnates. Min Hyuk then says that he is excited and he knows how it will go down. Later on, we see that Mr. Suk suddenly wakes up and he is back to life. However, he is back to life in his own bedroom. After coming back to his senses, Mr. Suk realizes that it was the first time he had lost his life in a while, and then he realized what Min Hyuk had done to him, and so he gets mad and decides to prove to Min Hyuk that he messed with the wrong guy, and that he will show him just how overpowered he is because he can come back to life. Saying this, Mr. Suk goes to grab on to a wrench. However, his head starts spinning and hurting at that very moment. His eyes get foggy and blurry. Mr. Suk wonders just what is happening with him as he feels constant discomfort. We then see that Mr. Suk's eye turns red for a slight moment, but it goes back to normal immediately. Mr. Suk wonders just what this weird sensation was. Mr. Suk then checks the date to see that 3 days had already passed, as is accustomed to his revival. Mr. Suk decides that he should go and check on Cha Yerin first before doing anything else. Mr. Suk then runs out of his apartment room. Kim Min Hyuk and Secretary Jo sees all this live from the CCTV camera, and Secretary Jo says that it's unbelievable how someone she finished off is back to life all of a sudden. Min Hyuk then tells Secretary Jo to change the camera to the hotel room and rewind the footage, so that they can see when exactly did Sukwan come back to life. Meanwhile, we see that Mr. Suk has gone to see Cha Yerin, who is seen burning off the belongings of her deceased father in front of fire. Yerin gets emotional seeing Mr. Suk, and she tells him that her father is now gone forever. On the other hand, Kim Min Hyuk and Secretary Jo check the footage of the hotel room to find out just how Sukwan revived him, and they get shocked seeing how it all went down. Kim Min Hyuk says that it's really creepy and unbelievable how Sukwan came back to life in this manner, while he has a curious look on his face. We then see the footage they were checking. In the footage, we see that Mr. Suk's body is laid out lifeless and his blood surrounds him. However, suddenly, his body just disappears in thin air, leaving nothing behind except for his blood. Secretary Jo says that she has no idea how that happened, and that it's unbelievable how Sukwan's corpse just disappeared into nothingness. Kim Min-hyuk says that the mystery and supernatural aspect of it is not important enough for them to ponder upon now. Instead, it's more important for them to believe in this supernatural phenomenon and try to figure out every which way that it could potentially benefit them moving into the future. Kim Min-hyuk says that this is the only way that they should think about it, and he says that with a freakish smirk on his face. The scene then changes, and we see that Mr. Suk and Cha Yerin are standing in front of the graveyard where Cha Hyung-suk was buried. Cha Yerin then remembers something, and he asks Mr. Suk that he did promise her that he would be back right away. However, he came back after 3 entire days, so why did it take so long? Mr. Suk is taken aback by this question, and he doesn't really know what to say in reply. But Cha Yerin understands that he is uncomfortable, and she changes the topic by saying she is very thankful towards Mr. Suk for bringing her here, as she had never had the courage to visit a graveyard before. Yerin further goes on to say that if it weren't for the old man, while referring to Mr. Suk, that she wouldn't be able to do anything. Mr. Suk is overwhelmed by hearing all this. Later on, we see that Mr. Suk and Cha Yerin are walking back slowly from the graveyard, both saddened. As the uncanny silence is too much for him to handle, Mr. Suk speaks up to break the ice and asks Cha Yerin just what her plan is with her life going forward, because after all, she is just a minor kid who is in high school, so what is she going to do with her life? Cha Yerin replies to this by saying that she is just 1 more year away from graduation, and that after graduation she will be just fine, as she will get herself a part-time job. She then further adds to this by saying that she will be going to college after she is done with high school, and there, she will get the teacher certification and then she will start being a school teacher. Yerin then hopes to meet someone who loves her and values her more than his job. Then they will get married and they will buy a house with a front yard. She also adds that she wants a son and a daughter too. Mr. Suk is taken aback by all this information, and he ends up telling Cha Yerin that she doesn't have to go into such intricate details. Cha Yerin says that this was the imagination of her for her. She then smiles, but sadness paints over her face, as she says that it's funny how her father had such a detailed life planned out for her. She then goes on to say that she still can't believe that such a person would end up taking his own life. Cha Yerin then suddenly grabs Mr. Suk's arm and stops. This shocks Mr. Suk, but Yerin goes on ahead to say that there is something that she needs Mr. Suk to help her with. She continues further, saying that her father must have definitely seeked out and gone after the people of the company that did him wrong. She says that Mr. Suk most definitely knows them, and he also knows that those people are bad, and that they also control gangsters and use them when needed. Yerin says that only Mr. Suk can help her with this, but she wants him to help her find the people who did all these things to her family, help her track down the company that caused all these issues for her dad and her. She wants him to help her get the revenge for her father. Hearing all this, Mr. Suk is at a loss for words because everything that Kim Min-hyuk had told him comes back to him, all the things he had said to him about how he has so much power, and how he can use that power to end people like he ended Cha Hyung-suk, and how he had told him to stay out of this or else it would cause them even more problems going ahead. And so to protect Cha Yerin, Mr. Suk tells her to forget about it and move on. After leaving Yi-rin, Hwan Suk walked along the road, lost in thought about how he could handle Min-hyuk Kim before Yi-rin found out the truth. He knew from experience that he couldn't keep dying over and over, so he was trying to devise a plan. While immersed in his thoughts, a man with 2 bags passed by him. Without warning, the man pulled out a silenced gun and shot Hwan Suk in the head. When Hwan Suk came to, he found himself facing Min-hyuk Kim. His arms and legs were bound tightly to rods, making any movement impossible. Confused, Hwan Suk asked Min-hyuk why he was at his house. Min-hyuk calmly told him that Hwan Suk was special because he had the ability to come back to life 3 days after dying. Hearing this, Hwan Suk was stunned. He couldn't understand how Min-hyuk had discovered his secret, especially since he had only died in front of him once. Min-hyuk proposed an offer, promising Hwan Suk at least 1 billion won a year if he agreed to work for him. Hwan Suk, however, refused the offer and dismissed Min-hyuk as a psychopath. Before he could say anything more, one of Min-hyuk's men silenced him by covering his mouth. Min-hyuk seemed unfazed by the rejection and told Hwan Suk that he didn't need an answer right away, suggesting that he think it over carefully. He mentioned he had prepared something special for him and walked away, leaving behind 2 intimidating men, the same one who had shot Hwan Suk earlier and another, equally threatening figure. Meanwhile, Yi-rin stood in front of Hwan Suk's door, reflecting on how much time had passed since she last saw him. She noted that it was already summer, yet there had been no sign of him since that day. She could no longer hear the familiar sound of him playing games, and despite her attempts to reach out, she hadn't been able to contact him. Feeling conflicted, she decided to walk away, convincing herself that it was best not to get involved. She didn't want to risk putting Hwan Suk in danger. At the same time, one of the assassins stood behind the peephole of Hwan Suk's door, speaking on a call. He remarked how effective the soundproofing was, noting that the girl next door had no idea what was happening. Inside the apartment, two muscular men were cleaning blood from their knives, casually discussing how this was the 23rd time Hwan Suk had died. In his half-conscious state, Hwan Suk noticed that the interior of his room looked slightly different. It took him a moment to realize that the walls were now lined with the same soundproof tiles he used to install during his part-time job, the ones he remembered being ridiculously expensive. His thoughts were interrupted when one of the men struck him with an electric rod, sending waves of unbearable pain through his body. He writhed in agony, screaming as the torture continued. With each death and revival, Hwan Suk's initial resolve to fight back began to falter. He kept telling himself that the next time he revived, he would kill them all. But the torturers kept changing their methods, never giving him the chance to act. One of them injected a lethal poison into his veins, causing him to die in excruciating pain. As each revival took its toll, his confidence crumbled, and his thoughts began to shift. He no longer wanted to keep dying. At one point, his trembling hands reached out to grab one of the torturers' coats. Desperately, he begged them to stop, saying he would do whatever Minhyuk wanted. He no longer cared about resistance, he only wanted the pain to end. The assassin recorded his desperate pleas, streaming them live to Minhyuk, who watched it on a screen with a detached expression. Chief Cho observed Hwan Suk's broken state and remarked that, in the end, he was nothing more than an average man with an extraordinary ability. Minhyuk rose from his seat and walked toward the balcony, seemingly lost in thought. When Chief Cho asked if something was bothering him, Minhyuk replied that everything was unfolding as planned. However, he admitted that it would have been more entertaining if Hwan Suk had done something unexpected. With a faint smirk, Minhyuk glanced up at the sky, as if anticipating a twist that had yet to come. Elsewhere, in a hospital room, a police officer entered, greeted by a waiting doctor. The doctor informed the officer that the patient had finally woken up. The detective wasted no time, ordering the officers to arrest the patient. As they cuffed him, the doctor cautioned the detective, advising that the patient needed rest since he had just regained consciousness. The detective dismissed the warning, explaining that the patient was dangerous. He had taken down an entire gang on his own. The detective insisted that they had to arrest him now, while he was still weak, or risk facing severe consequences later. Before the detective could finish speaking, a loud crack echoed through the room. The officers turned just in time to see the patient snap the metal bed rails and use them as weapons. In a sudden burst of violence, he brutally beat the detective and the officers, leaving them on the ground. The doctor, paralyzed with fear, cowered in a corner as the patient approached. Calmly, the man stripped a fallen officer of his uniform and put it on. As he adjusted the fit, he leaned toward the doctor and took the glasses from his face, placing them on his own. The patient was revealed to be the bald man. The injured detective, clutching his side, asked where the man was planning to go and if he intended to flee the country again. The bald man turned briefly, replying that he had no plans to leave. There was something he still needed to take care of here. Meanwhile, back at Hwan Suk's apartment, one of the assassins was on a call with Minhyuk. He reported that Hwan Suk had just revived, though this time he was completely drained and barely able to move. It didn't seem to matter how they killed him anymore, his spirit had been thoroughly broken. The assassin gave a detailed breakdown of Hwan Suk's struggle. He explained that Hwan Suk had fought hard during the first 28 deaths. By the 30th, the pain became too much, and Hwan Suk tried to escape. From the 35th to the 39th deaths, he was exhausted and begged for mercy. From the 40th to the 45th, Hwan Suk had stopped all activity altogether, as if he had accepted his fate. Chief Cho observed his condition and noted that Hwan Suk was beginning to show signs of PTSD. She warned that if they continued, they would destroy him completely. Turning to Minhyuk, she asked what he wanted to do next. The assassin, growing impatient, asked Minhyuk over the phone how much longer they needed to keep this up. He complained that they had plenty of other people to kill in the world and didn't have time to waste. Minhyuk, however, gave him new instructions, causing the assassin to turn to his comrades and announce that their task here was finished. Minhyuk wanted them to bring Hwan-suk to him. Following orders, one of the assassins filled a syringe with a muscle relaxant. He grabbed Hwan-suk's arm, preparing to inject it. But before the needle could pierce his skin, Hwan-suk twisted the man's wrist, reversing the syringe and plunging it into the assassin's own chest. The muscle relaxant took effect immediately, leaving the man immobilized. Not wasting any time, Hwan-suk noticed the electric rod hanging from another man's jacket. He snatched the rod and swung it at the remaining muscular guard. The current surged through the man, dropping him to the floor. After neutralizing his captors, Hwan-suk quickly freed himself from his bindings. Turning to the assassin leader, he sarcastically called him Pikachu and asked if he had ever experienced the feeling of his blood vessels bursting. Amused, the assassin removed his red jacket and, with a smirk, acknowledged that Hwan-suk had been pretending all along. The man put on black gloves and explained that they had planned to stop the torture, sparing Hwan-suk further suffering, but now, thanks to his defiance, they had more work to do. Seeing this, Hwan-suk rolled up his sleeves and reflected briefly on how close he had come to giving up. For a fleeting moment, he had been willing to do anything to escape the pain. But as he kept dying and reviving, he realized how dangerous people like these assassins were, individuals who killed without remorse. If he allowed them to control him, he knew he would eventually become just like them. And that was something he could not accept. Minhyuk watched the entire scene unfold through a live CCTV feed. When Hwan-suk raised the electric rod and pointed it toward the camera, Minhyuk's heart raced with excitement. This was exactly what he wanted to see. If Hwan-suk had surrendered completely, his ideals would have been impossible to achieve. With renewed determination, Hwan-suk charged at the assassin and tried to strike him with the electric rod. But the man, anticipating the attack, caught it with his gloved hand. The rubber neutralized the shock, leaving the weapon useless. In retaliation, the assassin punched Hwan-suk in the face, following up with a series of powerful blows. As Hwan-suk staggered, blood dripping from his mouth, the assassin taunted him, calling himself a professional who could predict his opponent's every move. With a final punch to the jaw, the assassin sent Hwan-suk crashing to the floor. Though his body throbbed with pain, Hwan-suk smiled. After all the torture he had endured, a few punches felt insignificant. The assassin pulled out a sharp blade and coldly announced that he would skin Hwan-suk alive, ensuring that he couldn't die or live comfortably. Hwan-suk, unshaken, mentioned a bald man who used to say the same thing. Without warning, Hwan-suk pulled a lighter from his pocket and flicked it on. An instant later, an explosion rocked the room, setting the entire place ablaze. Flames surrounded them, and for the first time, the assassin looked afraid and confused. Hwan-suk calmly explained that the soundproofing tiles lining the walls were made of polystyrene, a material that burned exceptionally well. The assassin, panicked, bolted toward the exit. But before he could escape, Hwan-suk kicked him from behind, sending him sprawling to the ground. Seizing the opportunity, Hwan-suk grabbed the assassin by the neck with both hands, choking him with all his strength. Gasping for air, the assassin struggled desperately. Hwan-suk, with a grim smile, reminded him that once something had begun, it had to be seen through to the end. The assassin, his oxygen running out, managed to rasp that Hwan-suk was only acting recklessly because he knew he would revive if he died. However, the man warned that this time was different. If the apartment burned to the ground, Hwan-suk might not wake up in his usual spot. Minhyuk, watching through the live feed, was momentarily shocked by this revelation. But Hwan-suk smiled, unbothered by the possibility. He didn't care anymore. As the assassin's strength faded, he desperately reached for a nearby blade and stabbed Hwan-suk in the stomach. The pain surged through Hwan-suk's body, but instead of despair, he let out a grin. After everything he had been through, the stab was nothing. Tightening his grip on the assassin's throat, Hwan-suk squeezed until the man lost consciousness. Releasing the limp body, Hwan-suk muttered that the assassin had messed with the wrong guy. The thick smoke from the fire filled the room, making it hard to breathe. Overwhelmed by the fumes, Hwan-suk's vision blurred, and he collapsed into unconsciousness. Just then, a man in a blue jacket made his way up the stairs toward Hwan Suk's apartment. Muttering to himself, he expressed frustration over Hwan Suk borrowing so much money and disappearing for months without returning his calls. As he reached the door, his eyes widened in disbelief at the sight of flames pouring from the windows. The man Yanga, Hwan Suk's old friend, stood there, bewildered by what he was seeing. A short time later, firefighters arrived and managed to contain the blaze. One of the firemen reported to his captain that they had rescued 2 individuals from the scene. They also confirmed that the resident of Unit 403, a student, was not home during the incident. Chief Cho arrived at the scene and immediately called Minhyuk to report the situation. She informed him that the apartment was completely burned out. When Minhyuk asked about Hwan Suk, Chief Cho replied that only the 2 cleaners had been found inside, suggesting that Hwan Suk had somehow escaped. She added that she wasn't convinced he was gone for good and intended to search for him. As the call ended, Minhyuk leaned back with a grin. Things had taken an unexpected turn, but he found it thrilling. The thought of Hwan Suk potentially losing his ability to revive intrigued him. With a sly smile, Minhyuk began to contemplate his next move. If Hwan Suk had truly lost his power, then perhaps it was finally time to kill him for good. Yanga slapped Hwan Suk's face, hoping to wake him up, and after a moment, Hwan Suk's eyes fluttered open. Disoriented, he found himself staring at Yanga and immediately felt overwhelmed with questions: why he was there, what had happened to his house, and how everything had spiraled out of control. Yanga, irritated by the confusion, mentioned that he had the same questions. He explained that he had come to check on Hwan Suk after months of no contact, though in reality, his visit was motivated more by money than concern. When Yanga noticed the unconscious man lying next to Hwan Suk, he asked him who the man was. Hwan Suk, startled, asked if Yanga could really see him. Without hesitation, Yanga pointed toward the man and told Hwan Suk that he was right there. Turning to look, Hwan Suk saw the assassin stirring awake, raising a blade to strike. Before the attack could land, Yanga yanked Hwan Suk backward, narrowly saving him from the blow. The assassin, unfazed by the miss, dropped the knife and pulled out a handgun. He aimed it at Hwan Suk's head, tauntingly asking if shooting him would be enough to stop him from coming back to life. Yanga, thinking the gun was a toy, didn't seem alarmed, but Hwan Suk's body shook in fear. He knew it was real. The assassin prepared to pull the trigger, but before he could fire, a large figure grabbed him from behind and lifted him off the ground. The bald man, moving with brutal efficiency, slammed the assassin's head into the pavement, knocking him unconscious. After dealing with the threat, the bald man turned toward Hwan Suk and Yanga, his expression cold and unwavering. He said he needed to ask Hwan Suk something, his tone making it clear that this was no friendly inquiry. Hwan Suk could hardly believe the bald man was still alive. It dawned on him that he was without any weapons and would have no choice but to fight barehanded. The bald man took a step forward, his gaze locked on Hwan Suk, and asked if it had been him who blew up the boat at the port. Hwan Suk, denying it, told him that it wasn't his doing. Yanga, still trying to make sense of the situation, asked what the two were talking about, confusion lacing his voice. The bald man, however, seemed to piece things together and muttered that it must have been Minhyuk Kim behind the explosion. With no more words to offer, the bald man decided it was time to fight. He squared his shoulders and raised his fists, challenging Hwan Suk. Seeing no way to avoid the confrontation, Hwan Suk prepared himself for the fight. Just as the tension reached a breaking point, Yanga stepped between them, trying to defuse the situation. He suggested they talk things out instead of fighting, wondering aloud if Hwan Suk had done something wrong. The bald man didn't bother to respond. Instead, he drove his elbow into Yanga's face, knocking him down with a single blow, and immediately engaged Hwan Suk. The fight was brutal. The bald man delivered a powerful punch to Hwan Suk's stomach, causing him to stagger. Hwan Suk tried to retaliate with a punch, but the bald man dodged it effortlessly and followed up with a hit to Hwan Suk's face. Yanga, lying on the ground, felt the sting of the blow and touched his broken glasses. He muttered to himself, wondering what kind of trouble Hwan Suk had gotten himself into to attract these kinds of people. As he lifted his head, he saw the bald man grab Hwan Suk by the neck, pinning him down. Hwan Suk, realizing he couldn't win in a fair fight, spotted the assassin's handgun lying on the ground. In an attempt to provoke his opponent, Hwan Suk hinted that the bald man's actions were tied to the one-eyed man. He mentioned that he knew about the two using a couple's app, hoping to unsettle him. The bald man's expression darkened, and his anger boiled over. Enraged, he punched Hwan Suk again, sending him sprawling onto the road. As Hwan Suk hit the pavement, his hand found the gun. He tried to raise it, but the bald man grabbed him by the hair and wrestled the weapon away with ease. With his knee pressing into Hwan Suk's head, the bald man sneered, admitting that he couldn't believe his organization had been brought down by someone like Hwan Suk. He remarked that even killing him wouldn't matter since he would just come back to life. Instead, the bald man decided to break Hwan Suk's limbs, ensuring he wouldn't be a threat anymore. Just as the bald man was about to snap Hwan Suk's arm, Yanga intervened, telling him to stop. Yanga admitted that he didn't know what had happened between them, but whatever it was, it had gone far enough. The bald man, however, wasn't in the mood to negotiate. He aimed another punch at Yanga, but this time, Yanga dodged it with ease and retaliated with a swift kick to the bald man's head. The blow forced the man to drop to one knee, stunned by Yanga's unexpected skill. Memories flooded Hwan Suk's mind as he watched Yanga fight. Back in high school, Hwan Suk had dreamt of becoming the toughest fighter in school, but he had never been able to surpass Yanga, who was obsessed with Bruce Lee and martial arts. After one of their fights, Hwan Suk had bought Yanga cold drinks, and the two had sat together, chatting like old friends. During their conversation, Yanga had asked why Hwan Suk was so determined to become the top dog. He assumed it was to impress girls, but Hwan Suk had denied it. Yanga had pulled out his social security card and admitted that while nothing else scared him, that little plastic card terrified him. He confessed that even though people admired him for his strength, none of it would matter once they graduated. He didn't know how to handle the responsibilities of adulthood. Their unlikely friendship had grown from that conversation, but things changed when Yanga got involved in a serious fight. The consequences of that fight forced him to pay settlement money for years, dragging him into the harsh realities of adult life. Though Yanga had given up fighting, it was clear to Hwan Suk now that he hadn't lost his skills. Back in the present, the bald man spat blood onto the ground, impressed by Yanga's speed and ability. Yanga, still catching his breath, suggested they call it even, remarking that they were too old to be fighting like this. The bald man chuckled, acknowledging Yanga's skill, and promised to put in more effort this time. The bald man switched to a boxing stance, throwing rapid punches. Yanga dodged the first two attacks, but the third, a powerful uppercut, connected, sending him reeling. Despite the blow, Yanga regained his footing using his martial arts technique. In one fluid motion, Yanga leaped off a wall and delivered a reverse kick to the bald man's head, knocking him to the ground. But the fight had taken its toll. Yanga clutched his neck, wincing from the pain. He muttered that he was too old for this and told Hwan Suk that he needed to be honest about what he had done. Yanga admitted he had sworn never to fight again, but Hwan Suk had forced his hand. Before Hwan Suk could explain, he noticed the bald man rising to his feet. "Behind you," he warned Yanga. The bald man swung another punch, but before it could connect, nearby civilians began murmuring among themselves. They recognized the bald man as a wanted criminal from the news and discussed calling the police. Hearing this, the bald man gave a sly grin and told Yanga it was his lucky day. Without another word, the bald man retreated into the shadows, leaving the scene. Moments later, Yanga swayed on his feet, the pain catching up with him. He lost consciousness and collapsed onto the ground. The next morning, Yanga woke up in his house, realizing that Hwan Suk had carried him back. His head throbbed painfully, and with a groan, he told Hwan Suk that he was big trouble. Just as Hwan Suk tried to speak, Yanga cut him off, saying they'd talk later. He needed more sleep. However, Hwan Suk interrupted again, this time asking Yanga to teach him how to fight. Yanga joked, telling him that he was getting too old to teach anyone to fight. But when he noticed Hwan Suk's serious expression, he asked why he was suddenly interested in learning. Hwan Suk responded grimly, saying that if Yanga didn't teach him, he might end up dead. Reluctantly, Hwan Suk shared a fabricated story. He claimed he'd gotten drunk, ended up in a fight, and almost killed someone. Unfortunately, that someone turned out to be a gangster. Now, the gang was demanding 100 million won in compensation. In an attempt to hide, Hwan Suk had dyed his hair red and fled to a rural area. After spending months in hiding, he thought the danger had passed, but the gang was still after him. Yanga tried to make sense of the situation, frustration building inside him. Grabbing Hwan Suk by the collar, he told him he wanted to punch him. Hwan Suk kept the truth about his powers hidden, knowing that he couldn't involve Yanga, since Yanga had only one life to lose, no matter how well he could fight. Hwan Suk also suspected that in burning down his house, he might have lost his powers too. When Yanga asked if Hwan Suk had contacted the police, Hwan Suk scoffed, saying that the situation didn't seem like something the police could fix. With a sigh, Yanga put on a blue jacket and told Hwan Suk to follow him outside. Hwan Suk initially thought that his lessons were about to begin, but Yanga made it clear he didn't have time to teach, he had to make money. Confused, Hwan Suk asked where they were going. The two made their way to Hanlim Gym. Yanga explained that he had sent Hwan Suk there last year to stop him from wasting his time like a loser. However, Hwan Suk had quit after only a week, exhausted by the workouts. At the gym entrance, a muscular man named Guansu greeted Yanga, saying it had been a while. Yanga asked if the master was around, and Guansu replied that he was asleep in his office. Turning to Hwan Suk, Yanga asked if Guansu remembered him. Guansu gave a dry chuckle, of course. He remembered the guy who had thrown a mop at him last year, leaving a scar on his face. Hwan Suk bowed deeply, apologizing for what he had done. Guansu, still amused, asked Yanga what this was all about. Yanga admitted that the situation was complicated, but Hwan Suk needed to start training again. Guansu laughed, saying he didn't expect much from Hwan Suk, but Yanga insisted that he had changed. After some friendly banter, Guansu agreed to let Hwan Suk back in, though he warned it wasn't really up to him, it would depend on the master. Guansu then challenged Hwan Suk to a fight in the ring to see if he had truly changed. Yanga objected, but Hwan Suk accepted the challenge. Yanga, reluctant but resigned, rang the bell to start the fight, warning that it would only be one round. Guansu wasted no time, landing a powerful punch to Hwan Suk's face, followed by several more blows. The noise from the fight stirred someone awake in another room. A man with long hair stepped out, grumbling about who dared to disturb his nap. It was the master, who had just woken up. Spotting the fight in the ring, he asked Yanga what was going on. Yanga told him to stop Guansu, but the master shook his head, reminding him that the ring was made for fighting. Curious about the new guy in the ring, the master asked who he was. Yanga explained that Hwan Suk was the one who caused a scene and quit the gym last year. The master couldn't quite recall, admitting that too many people quit in a similar way. As he watched the fight unfold, the master noticed that Hwan Suk kept moving forward, despite taking hit after hit. A grin spread across his face, he was impressed. Even after so many punches, Hwan Suk stood his ground. Guansu, visibly shaken, began to question what was wrong with him. Hwan Suk, still smiling, told Guansu that compared to what he was facing now, those punches were nothing. The master finally ordered them to stop, satisfied with what he had seen. He told Hwan Suk that starting tomorrow, he would need to pay 80,000 won a month and begin training seriously. In the next scene, a hiring manager from CYT Korea met with Yi Rin at a cafe. The manager reviewed the data she had sent and remarked that he understood why the media had ignored it. However, he assured her that CYT Korea was a foreign company, and no one would dare harm them so easily. Concerned about the potential backlash, the manager asked if she was ready for the consequences. Yi Rin confidently replied that she was prepared for whatever came. The following day, Hwan Suk resumed his training at the gym, reflecting on why he had quit after just a week. He remembered how frustrating it had been, the master drunk in the middle of the day, bullies targeting him, and the worst of all, being forced to learn tap dance. After completing 15 rounds of practice, Hwan Suk sat down to rest, noticing that the master was fast asleep. Frustrated, he woke him up, announcing that he had finished. The master, unimpressed, ordered him to do 20 more rounds. Desperation creeping in, Hwan Suk asked to learn proper fighting techniques instead of tap dance. When he criticized the gym's training methods, the master grabbed a bamboo sword and hit him on the head, warning him never to drop his guard. He would have been dead if it had been a real sword. The master gave him a new rule. From now on, Hwan Suk was to walk on his tiptoes at all times, except when sleeping. Embarrassed but determined, Hwan Suk spent the next day walking on his tiptoes, struggling to maintain his balance. Passers-by stared at him, adding to his discomfort, but he kept going, knowing that this was just the beginning of his grueling journey. At Yanga's house, he told Hwan Suk to set the table since the ramen was ready. However, Hwan Suk was preoccupied with his injured legs, noticing countless scratches that stung painfully. He asked Yanga if the master had also made him do tap dance in his early training. Yanga explained that all martial arts begin with mastering the tips of one's toes, adding that even Bruce Lee had devoted 90% of his training to footwork. He assured Hwan Suk that the master knew exactly what he was doing. Later that night, while both were asleep, Hwan Suk suddenly woke up, startled by the sight of someone moving near the window. He realized there wasn't much time, especially since he didn't know that the bald man and Minhyuk were closing in on him. Determined to prepare, Hwan Suk began training rigorously. One day, frustrated with his progress, he decided to test his abilities by picking a fight with the master. Every time the master tried to strike, Hwan Suk dodged with ease. The master smiled, impressed, and told Hwan Suk to follow him. The master led him to the Dongwu Capitol building and mentioned that a gangster named Sinwan had once ruled the neighborhood before dying 6 months ago. When Hwan Suk asked why he was bringing this up, the master suddenly grabbed a rock and hurled it at one of the building's windows, shattering the glass. Without hesitation, the master pointed at Hwan Suk and told the gangsters inside that Hwan Suk had thrown the rock. The gang members stormed out, chasing after Hwan Suk and the master. As they ran, Hwan Suk demanded to know what the master was thinking. The master grinned, saying this was a perfect chance to apply his martial arts skills in a real-world scenario. Eventually, they found themselves trapped at a dead end, cornered by gang members wielding wooden rods. Frustrated, Hwan Suk blamed the master for leading them into a trap, complaining that the only thing he had learned so far was tap dancing. The master calmly handed something to Hwan Suk, who asked what it was. The master cryptically replied that there were many things in the world stronger than fists. Hwan Suk equipped the weapon and prepared for a fight. Swinging it with surprising skill, he managed to knock out every gangster. Staring at the weapon in disbelief, he realized how powerful it was. The master reminded him that punches and kicks were merely exercises. The most important thing in a real fight was to win, by any means necessary. In the next scene, Minhyuk was shown washing his mother's legs. His mother, in her confused state, called him Dad. Wiping his hands, Minhyuk asked a nearby caretaker if everything was fine. The caretaker hesitated before explaining that his mother had accidentally broken a glass in the bathroom, resulting in the bandages on her hands. Minhyuk's expression darkened. Without warning, he grabbed the caretaker by the neck, demanding that she never take her eyes off his mother again. Terrified, his mother trembled at the sight of his anger. Realizing what he had done, Minhyuk abruptly released his grip, falling to his knees as his heart rate spiked. Fumbling, he took some pills, calming himself as his heartbeat returned to normal. His mother tearfully promised never to upset him again, while Minhyuk reassured her that he would soon get rid of the people who had hurt her and restore her health. Back at Hwan Suk's apartment, he arrived to find a police investigation banner blocking the entrance. Standing in front of the burnt remains of his home, he sighed, lamenting not the loss of his belongings, but the fact that his entire collection of adult videos 2 terabytes worth was gone. Turning toward Yi-rin's apartment, he felt a pang of guilt, realizing he had nearly burned down her place too. It had been months since he last saw Yi-rin, and he hoped Minhyuk hadn't done anything to harm her. Placing his hand on her door, he silently promised to put an end to everything, asking her to prepare a warm meal for him when he returned safely. Just as he finished his thought, he noticed Yi-rin standing behind him, surprised to see him there. Embarrassed, Hwan Suk apologized, thinking she had been asleep. Curious, he asked why she was out so late. Yi-rin told him she thought he had moved out in May and mentioned that the landlord had rented his old apartment to a handsome new tenant. She asked if he had come back to see her, making Hwan Suk smile awkwardly. He explained that he had heard his house had burned down and wanted to see the damage. After a brief farewell, he wished her good night and turned to leave. Before he could walk away, Yi-rin called out, asking if he wanted to stay with her that night. Startled, Hwan Suk turned around, only to decline the offer. Smirking, Yi-rin hinted that she had something in mind for them to do, leaving Hwan Suk blushing furiously. The next scene shifted to a quiet riverside, where Hwan Suk and Yi-rin sat on a bridge overlooking the water. Hwan Suk couldn't help but feel let down. Her invitation had sounded much more exciting than this peaceful outing. Curious, he asked what she wanted to do. Yi-rin replied that the river view was beautiful, leaving Hwan Suk slightly disappointed by the simplicity of her answer. Sitting beside her, he offered her a milk carton. She scolded him, saying she wanted a beer instead, and snatched a beer can from his hand. Just as she began drinking, Hwan Suk grabbed it back, reminding her that she wasn't old enough to drink yet. Despite the playful bickering, they soon found themselves enjoying the serene view together. After some time, Hwan Suk asked how Yi-rin was doing. She told him that she was now a senior in high school and just wanted to graduate. A flashback revealed how, despite her father's encouragement to stay in school, she had wanted to drop out to pursue something important. She had tried to contact people who worked with her father, but no one was willing to help. One man, Mr. Park, had seemed helpful, but when he made an inappropriate advance toward her, Yi-rin left in disgust. Later, through research, she discovered that CYT Korea was a company free from external pressure, and she hoped they might assist her. With that hope, she had sent data to their manager, Mina. Back in the present, Yi-rin began crying quietly by the riverbank. Concerned, Hwan Suk asked what was wrong. Instead of answering, she rested her head on his shoulder, insisting she wasn't crying but simply wanted to stay like that for a while. Hearing this, Hwan Suk gently placed his hand on her shoulder, letting the moment linger in silence. In the morning, as Yi-rin prepared to leave, Hwan Suk asked where she was going. She responded that she had to go somewhere far. Before parting, she thanked him for staying with her and said goodbye. But Hwan Suk stopped her, asking for her phone. Taking both her phone and his, he installed a location tracking app. He explained that this way he could track her movements in real time and assured her that if anything happened, he would come running. Hearing this, Yi-rin smiled and thanked him before heading off in the opposite direction. As she walked, she glanced at her phone, noticing the tracking app. Just then, Mina called, asking if she was ready since they had only an hour left. Yi-rin assured Mina that she would be there soon. Before continuing, she looked back and saw Hwan Suk leaving. A wave of conflicted emotions hit her. Though there had been many moments she wanted to lean on him, she no longer wanted to involve him in her situation. With a heavy heart, she threw the phone into a nearby trash bin. Meanwhile, Hwan Suk arrived at Yanga's house. When Yanga asked where he had been all night, Hwan Suk brushed it off, saying he had been nowhere. Yanga asked if he was hungry, but Hwan Suk replied that he intended to get some sleep. Checking his phone, Hwan Suk noticed that Yi-rin's location still showed as being at the Han River. He tried to close his eyes and rest, but Yanga's TV broadcast grabbed his attention. The news reported that Yi-rin, the daughter of a man killed by gangsters, was accusing Dowan Group of hiring the criminals as corporate raiders. The broadcast mentioned that she was holding a press conference at the Wajin building in Jongyo. At that, Hwan Suk's eyes shot open. He immediately rushed to Yanga's laptop to confirm the news, seeing Yi-rin on the live broadcast. Without hesitation, he bolted out of the house. At the press conference, reporters swarmed around Yi-rin, cameras flashing as she began her statement. She revealed that her father had been beaten to death by gangsters hired by a ruthless corporation. After his funeral, she had dropped out of school to investigate the company responsible for his death. Through her efforts, she uncovered two shocking truths. Elsewhere, Min-hyuk and Chief Cho were also watching the broadcast. Yi-rin disclosed that the company behind the hired gangsters was none other than Dowan Group. Additionally, she revealed that her father wasn't the only victim. 31 other companies had also been targeted. When a reporter asked if she had evidence, Yi-rin held up a USB drive, explaining that it contained Dowan Group's secret financial plans. Her father had tried to expose these plans just a week before he was killed. She further explained that the USB included detailed records of Min-hyuk's direct involvement with the hired criminals. She announced that these files would be submitted to the police as evidence. Chief Cho, watching nervously, confessed to Min-hyuk that she believed the files had been destroyed. Min-hyuk, however, remained composed, stating that the real issue wasn't that the files existed, it was that they had become public. He warned that if the files were authentic, this was only the beginning of their problems. During the press conference, Yi-rin directed a message at Min-hyuk, reminding him of his words at her father's funeral that victims should be compensated and perpetrators punished. With unwavering resolve, she vowed to ensure that Min-hyuk would face the consequences of his actions. Then, with finality, she tore apart a check he had once given her, symbolically severing any ties. Hwan-suk arrived at the press conference shortly after it ended, only to find the hall empty, with reporters and attendees already gone. Meanwhile, Min-hyuk discussed damage control with Chief Cho. He instructed her to contact Editor Park from Silla Daily and arrange a dinner with Prosecutor Choi from the Seoul Public Prosecutor's Office. He also emphasized the need to find Yi-rin quickly. However, their conversation was interrupted by a secured VIP phone line ringing. When Min-hyuk answered the call, a man on the other end, casually smoking a cigar, asked what was going on. Min-hyuk assured him that he would handle the situation. The man, clearly unhappy, informed Min-hyuk that he was heading over and demanded to receive a report in person. Min-hyuk understood that the caller was his boss, Mr. Park. A large crowd of reporters gathered outside the Dowan Group building, bombarding the bodyguards with questions. Inside, Min-hyuk's boss, Mr. Park, sat in his office, remarking that it had been a while since reporters swarmed their company. Suddenly, in a fit of rage, he swung a golf club and struck Min-hyuk in the face, causing blood to spill from his mouth. Despite the pain, Min-hyuk bent to his knees, yet Mr. Park continued to assault him, delivering a brutal kick to his chest. He confronted Min-hyuk, demanding to know why he had attended Hwan-suk's funeral. As the beating continued, Min-hyuk felt his heart rate spike, indicating rising panic. Mr. Park taunted him, calling him weak, and raised the club again. Just then, Chief Cho entered, standing protectively close to Min-hyuk, which made Mr. Park halt his attack. Chief Cho admonished Mr. Park, stating that he was taking things too far. Min-hyuk managed to stand, declaring that he would take full responsibility for the situation and would ensure no further damage was done to Dowan Group. Mr. Park, wiping blood from his golf club, retorted that he had dispatched his best men immediately after hearing the news, insisting that Yi-rin should pay for her actions. Min-hyuk opposed this idea, cautioning that if anything happened to her, the police would suspect them. Mr. Park dismissively replied that it was only Min-hyuk they would suspect. He pulled out a cigar, explaining that losses were inevitable in such situations, but as long as only Min-hyuk's name was mentioned in the news, he would be safe. Mr. Park insisted that Min-hyuk should take the blame entirely and suggested that once Yi-rin was dead, he should turn himself in, assuring him that he would assign one of his best lawyers to the case. After the confrontation, Min-hyuk and Chief Cho left Mr. Park's office. Concerned, Chief Cho asked if Min-hyuk was all right. She reminded him that Mr. Park couldn't behave this way because Min-hyuk had developed the operational plan for the secret fund. Without Min-hyuk's plan, Mr. Park would never have won the presidency in last year's election. Min-hyuk acknowledged this, saying that once the hunt was over, the hunting dog was often killed and consumed. He knew that this day would eventually come. As they approached the elevator, Chief Cho suggested he go to the hospital, but Min-hyuk insisted he didn't have time and needed to find Yi-rin before the president did. Just then, security guards reported to their boss that one reporter had infiltrated the building, but that they had failed to locate him. Chief Cho approached, and the head of security briefed her on the situation. Min-hyuk instructed them to disregard the matter, claiming he had more pressing issues to handle. As the elevator doors opened, Hwan-suk appeared behind Min-hyuk inside the lift. The security team identified him as the infiltrator. Without hesitation, Hwan-suk used a weapon given to him by a mentor to grab Min-hyuk by the neck and pull him into the elevator. Chief Cho and the security guards rushed to intervene, but the lift door closed before they could reach Min-hyuk. Chief Cho pounded on the door, noticing that the elevator was descending. She ordered the security team to stop the elevator, prioritizing Min-hyuk's safety. Inside the lift, Hwan-suk tightened his grip around Min-hyuk's neck, warning him that if he dared to lay a finger on Yi-rin, he would kill him. In response, Min-hyuk smiled, impressed that Hwan-suk had arrived so quickly. He taunted Hwan-suk, claiming that Yi Rin would soon be dead. Hwan Suk demanded to know what Min Hyuk had done to her. Min Hyuk then pulled out his cell phone, revealing that the radio frequency was exclusively owned by Dowan Group board members. Over the radio, Hwan Suk could hear that teams were searching for Yi Rin, and one had successfully located her based on her cell phone GPS. However, the phone was found in a trash can by the Han River. Min Hyuk informed Hwan Suk that an order to eliminate Yi Rin had already been given. Furious, Hwan Suk punched Min Hyuk in the face, demanding he tell all teams to stop their search. Min Hyuk replied that the order had come from one of his superiors, asserting that Yi Rin had gone too far and that the entire Dowan Group was now after her. He emphasized that it was out of his control. As the elevator reached the 4th floor, the doors opened to reveal a throng of security guards wielding steel rods. Hwan Suk, still gripping Min Hyuk's neck, warned the guards not to move, threatening to snap Min Hyuk's neck if they did. He stepped out of the lift, still holding Min Hyuk hostage. However, Min Hyuk smiled at the security team, instructing them to attack him without worrying about his safety. The security team hesitated, aware that Min Hyuk was a hostage, but he insisted they follow orders to subdue Hwan Suk and warned them not to make him repeat himself. The pressure mounted among the guards as they contemplated their next move. Hwan Suk suddenly squeezed Min Hyuk's neck tightly. One of the guards came up behind him and hit Hwan Suk with a rod, causing his grip to loosen and allowing Min Hyuk to escape. Min Hyuk then threw a cell phone toward Hwan Suk and told him it was a reward for coming all the way there. He got inside the elevator and said that the phone would be useful if Hwan Suk could get out of there alive. After the lift doors closed, all the guards ran toward Hwan Suk to attack him. He somehow dodged some attacks, grabbed the phone, and started running. The guards were chasing him, and he remembered what his master had taught him. The first rule of fighting was that if he was outnumbered, he had to stand with his back against a wall so that they could not get him from behind. Hwan Suk reached a dead end in the building, meaning no one could catch him from behind. He then took out his weapon and knocked out one of the guards. After that, he started swinging his weapon again and again, knocking down several guards. One guard took out a knife from his pocket, but Hwan Suk cut the knife in half with his weapon and hit the guard in the face. The cell phone rang, and someone on the line informed him that a team had found Yi Rin Cha's location, confirming that she was in the Sit Korea building in Mapo. Hearing this, Hwan Suk lost his focus on the fight, and a guard stabbed him from behind. Blood flowed from his back, but he managed to knock the guard out. Afterward, he overheard that all the agents were positioned in front of the Sit Korea building and that President Park had ordered them to seize Yi Rin Cha immediately. Hwan Suk realized he didn't have enough time and started running with the knife still stuck in his back. His vision began to blur as he approached the elevator and pressed the button, knowing he needed to get to Sit Korea in Mapo before something happened. The elevator reached the 4th floor, and when the doors opened, Hwan Suk saw another large number of guards waiting for him. He jumped out the 4th floor window, grabbing a streetlight pole to safely descend. As he landed, he spotted a taxi nearby and urgently asked the driver if he could drive him to Sit Korea in Mapo. The driver was shocked and asked if Hwan Suk was a superhero. Hwan Suk promised to pay double, prompting the driver to open the taxi door respectfully. He then started the taxi and drove toward Sit Korea. Meanwhile, Min Hyuk was watching the taxi as Hwan Suk escaped. Chief Cho expressed her relief that he was okay and informed him that President Park's agents had gathered at the girl's location. On the other side, the taxi was stuck in traffic. Inside the taxi, Hwan Suk pulled the knife out of his back and told the driver to go faster, but the driver replied that they were in a traffic jam. The driver asked Hwan Suk what he was doing and why he had come back from the sky, commenting that he had never seen anyone like him. The driver assumed that Hwan Suk was some kind of secret agent. He glanced back and noticed the significant amount of blood in his taxi, causing him to panic and suggest that they go to the police station. However, Hwan Suk insisted they had to go to Sit Korea and could not be late. At the Dowan office, Chief Cho told Min Hyuk that it was too late. President Park's agents were elite and never made mistakes. She was sure that Yi Rin Cha was already dead. In the taxi, Hwan Suk lost consciousness, and the driver tried to wake him up. Hwan Suk briefly thought he was dead, but suddenly opened his eyes to find himself in someone's room, surrounded by bandages. He checked the bandages and reassured himself that he was not dead yet. Looking around, he saw a bra, panties, and various makeup items, realizing it was a girl's room. He wondered where he was when he heard the sound of a shower running and thought someone was there. A woman stepped out of the bathroom wearing glasses and approached Hwan Suk. She was Mina, the sit manager. She expressed her relief that he was okay, mentioning that she had been worried when Hwan Suk started breathing so hard. She came closer to him on the bed, touched his wound and checked it, noting that the bleeding had stopped, so she assumed he had done a good job. Hwan Suk thanked her and tried to get out of bed, but she grabbed his hand and told him that Yirin was safe. Mina and Hwan Suk then sat in a car and drove somewhere. Mina mentioned that Yirin had told her a lot about him and that she had no idea it was Hwan Suk who fought the gangsters to save her. Mina noticed that the reason Hwan Suk had refused the job offer was because of Yirin, and she found that pretty cool, possibly developing a crush on him. Hwan Suk said he needed to ask her something, but Mina introduced herself first, and then Hwan Suk asked her why she was helping Yirin. On the other side, at the Dowan building, Min Hyuk entered Mr. Park's office to discuss the interference from Sit regarding the execution of Yirin. Mr. Park grew angry and asked Min Hyuk why Sit had hired so many people to protect the girl. Min Hyuk informed him that Sit was a French company operating the third largest online platform after Korea's two largest companies, and was among the top 10 global companies. He explained that their involvement could lead to an international dispute and harm the Dowan Group. Hearing this, Mr. Park slammed his fist on the table angrily and asked what was so special about that girl. Min Hyuk responded with a slight smile. On the other side, Mina and Min Hyuk arrived at the Sit company. Mina told him that she met Yirin a month ago and wanted to stop her because her plans seemed so dangerous. However, when they met at a cafe, Yirin explained that she just wanted to get revenge for what they did to her father. After receiving the files, Yirin no longer felt like taking revenge. She was shocked to learn how many people had been sacrificed like her family. She feared that if she disclosed this to the public, she might be killed like her father. If she didn't come forward with the truth, there would be even more victims like her family. While talking, they reached the front of the seminar room. Mina remarked that Yirin was such a strong child. Even then, she was fighting for everyone. Hwan Suk saw Yirin through the seminar hall's glass, surrounded by other victims, discussing something. Mina then tried to open the door, but Hwan Suk grabbed her hand and stopped her, saying it was okay. He didn't want to interrupt and just needed to ensure she was safe. Min Hyuk warned her that Yirin and Mina were being too naive about the Dowan Group, which was much more dangerous than they thought. In Mr. Park's office, Min Hyuk assured him not to worry. Sit may be a big company, but they were on their home ground now. He requested Mr. Park to let him handle the matter, as he was the only one who knew how to deal with that kind of situation. Min Hyuk warned that if Mr. Park abandoned him now, he wouldn't be safe either. Mr. Park was shocked by Min Hyuk's behavior. Min Hyuk then bowed and asked for leave. Afterward, Min Hyuk and Chief Cho exited the office, and Chief Cho smiled, telling him that the tables had turned. Mr. Park wouldn't be able to touch Min Hyuk for a while. However, the situation hadn't changed. Since they were dealing with a foreign company, there was a limit to how much they could affect them. Chief Cho thought they should deal with the media first. Min Hyuk asked her if she knew why he had just let Mr. Park beat him with a golf club that time. He then smiled and told her that everything about the Dowan Group was outdated. He ordered Chief Cho to contact the Russian mafia they had talked with last year and tell them to come to Korea. There was going to be a bloodbath. In the next scene, we see some muscular men in black suits with similar hairstyles arriving at the airport. They are the Russian mafia. Meanwhile, at the Sit Korea building, Mina told Min Hyuk that she knew they were dangerous and that he was worried about her. But realistically, it was impossible for them to even lay a finger on Yirin. Dowan understood what it meant to hurt Yirin when all of the media was paying too much attention. Also, the Sit security team was protecting Yirin 24/7 in case anyone tried to harm her. Hearing this, Min Hyuk told her to take care of herself, then walked toward the exit. From behind, Mina asked him why he didn't stay there with her if he was so worried about her. But Min Hyuk told Mina not to tell Yirin that he was there. He said he was going to do something that only he could do. At a bar, Min Hyuk held a meeting with the Russian mafia. After discussing the situation, the mafia left, and Chief Cho asked Min Hyuk what he had discussed with them. At the Sit company, Mina told Yirin she was going home, wishing her good night. She suggested that Yi-rin not go outside and to tell the security team if she needed anything. But upon hearing this, Yi-rin's face became dull, and she looked sad. Mina noticed that Yi-rin might feel trapped, but it was for her own safety. Yi-rin expressed her gratitude for everything Mina had done, including reporting her case to the media and ensuring her safety. Mina came closer to Yi-rin, squeezed her chin, and told her not to try to act like an adult. After that, Mina walked outside and told Yi-rin to go to bed before leaving. Yi-rin lay in bed, thinking about Hwan Suk and how she could meet some good people whom she could trust. Suddenly, a cell phone rang in the room. It was a call from a victim group. Yi-rin answered, and a lady asked her if she was okay because a lady from the victim group had come to her home, and the building was on fire. It wasn't her house, but the entire building was burning. The lady explained that she felt something was wrong, so she had been trying to call the other victims but couldn't reach some of them. There had been several accidents that day. A bus crash in Misandong resulted in 5 deaths and 13 injuries. A gas explosion in Hyuksik-dong burned a building to the ground, and in Bakdal-dong, Anyang, a steel frame fell on a man in his 50s, killing him instantly. Min Hyuk was watching the news when Chief Cho informed him that 12 out of the 31 members of the victim group had been confirmed dead so far. The lady who called Yi-rin was named Hyong Suk Shim. Min Hyuk remarked that Chief Cho had left her alive since she seemed to be the most fragile one. He ordered Chief Cho to send an intermediary payment to the Red Mafia. Chief Cho expressed her confusion, saying that using violence at that moment might work against him. Min Hyuk smiled and told her that they were very good at covering their tracks, and that there wouldn't be any evidence left. He then sat up from his chair and told Chief Cho to go home. Seeing this, Chief Cho thought she really didn't understand his actions these days. Upon hearing the news, Mina walked to the parking area, sat in her car, and called Yi-rin to warn her that something was happening and that she would come to her right away. She pressed the start button, and a blast sound echoed through the phone. There was an explosion in Mina's car. Yi-rin then stepped outside the secure room, but a security guard stopped her and asked what was going on. Yi-rin replied that she had to go. Mina was in danger. Suddenly, the security guard heard a voice on his device. The other guards reported an emergency on the first floor near the main gates. The victims of the Dowan group wanted to see Yi-rin right away. A crowd of victims gathered in front of Yi-rin, and one of them told her that there were 31 of them, and 12 had suffered accidents. This man walked toward Yi-rin and accused her, saying they could have avoided dying if she hadn't started all that. He insisted they were all going to die because of her. Witnessing the behavior of her own people, Yi-rin began to cry, and one of the ladies who had called Yi-rin earlier screamed, insisting that enough was enough. They all agreed to fight together, so why was everyone blaming everything on Yi-rin? On the other side, Min Hyuk was at home, on a call with someone, asking if the rest of the victims had headed to Sit Korea. After saying this, he told the person they didn't have to do anything and ended the call. He sat at the dining table for dinner with his mother, speaking in a foreign language so his mother couldn't understand. She was impressed to see him speak fluently. At Sit, a lady remarked that they were the ones who had hidden behind Yi-rin in the first place. Suddenly, she received a call from an unknown number. Picking up the call, she was shocked by what the person on the other end had to say. After hanging up, she announced that the call had come from Managing Director Min Hyuk Kim of the Dowan Group. He was willing to pay them settlement money if they stopped now. Every victim would receive $1 billion in settlement, but there was one condition. They had to bring Yi-rin to the Dowan Group.